Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. I woke up with a sudden jolt, the kind you feel when you're unsure of where you are or what time it is. The room felt unfamiliar, but it was mine. The morning light crept through the blinds, and for a moment, everything seemed ordinary. But then I realized something was off. The clock on the wall read 8:30 in the morning, but my mind was blank. I couldn't recall how I had gotten into bed. I couldn't remember falling asleep. And more importantly, I couldn't remember the last few days. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Without thinking, I reached for it. The screen lit up, revealing several missed calls and unread messages. The strange part wasn't the volume, it was the numbers. None of them were familiar. Who were these people? Why had they called me? I opened the first message. It was from a name I didn't recognize. Where are you? We need to talk. A chill ran down my spine. The words were vague, but there was something urgent about them. Something unsettling. I scrolled through more messages, each one feeling like a puzzle piece I couldn't quite fit into place. I decided to call one of the numbers back. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, deep and distorted, like someone speaking through a wall. Hello? I asked, my voice trembling, unsure of what to expect. There was a long pause, followed by a strange, low laugh. The voice responded, but it was distorted, almost mechanical. You don't remember, do you? I froze. My heart raced as the voice continued, You're running out of time. The call abruptly ended. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the screen as if it would offer an explanation. My mind raced, but there were no answers. Only more questions. Where had I been? What had happened to me in those missing days? And why did it feel like someone was watching me? I slowly stood up, feeling an odd sense of vertigo as I made my way to the kitchen. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. The usual hum of the fridge, the quiet buzz of the electric stove, everything felt strangely muffled, as if the world outside had gone still. The air in the apartment felt heavier, almost thick, as if it were closing in on me. I tried to shake the sensation off, but it clung to me, persistent and unsettling. I grabbed a glass of water and sat down at the kitchen table, trying to ground myself. But the more I thought about the calls, the messages, the feeling that something was terribly wrong, the more the anxiety built. It was like I was being drawn into something I didn't understand, something beyond my control. The phone buzzed again. I jumped, my heart skipping a beat. Another message. This time it was from a different number, but the message was eerily familiar. I know what you did. Don't try to run. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I couldn't escape this feeling, this growing dread. I didn't know who was behind these messages, but I knew one thing for certain, whatever was happening, it was real. And it was coming for me. As I stared at the phone, the buzzing continued. One message after another. But none of them made sense. They were all cryptic, threatening, yet they felt like pieces of a puzzle I was too afraid to solve. Something inside me told me to leave the apartment, to run as far away as I could, but another part of me was paralyzed, trapped by the unknown. The more I tried to piece things together, the less it made sense. The only thing I could be sure of was that I had lost time. Time that wasn't mine anymore. And now, the past was catching up to me. The apartment suddenly felt colder, the warmth of the morning slipping away like a fading memory. I stood up, pacing restlessly, trying to make sense of what was happening. The phone remained silent for a moment, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the edge of my awareness. The air seemed thick, the silence too heavy. It pressed in on me, suffocating, and for a moment, I wondered if I was imagining it. But then, I heard it. A soft rustle, faint but distinct. Like footsteps, slow and deliberate, just outside my door. My heart leapt in my chest. I wasn't alone. I froze, straining to listen. The sound came again, closer this time, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Someone, or something, was there. I walked cautiously toward the door, my breath shallow and quick. I didn't want to open it, didn't want to know what was waiting for me on the other side, but the silence was more terrifying than any unknown could be. I had to know. My hand hovered over the doorknob, but before I could touch it, there was another sound. A soft scrape, like the dragging of something heavy across the floor. It came from the hallway. My mind raced. Was it real? Was I imagining this? No. It was too real, too tangible. I could feel it, like a presence pressing against me, pulling me into something dark. I turned the knob slowly, the metal cold against my fingers. The door creaked as it opened, revealing the hallway. It was empty, silent. Nothing moved. But something wasn't right. The hallway felt different. The lights above flickered erratically, casting strange shadows on the walls. Then, I saw it. A shape in the corner, just at the edge of the dim light. It was too dark to make out clearly, but it was there. A figure, tall and unmoving, standing perfectly still. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained my eyes to focus. The shape shifted, ever so slightly. It was closer now, as if it had inched forward in the moments when I wasn't looking. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped back, the door almost slamming behind me as I retreated. The figure didn't move, but the feeling of being watched intensified. I was being hunted, watched from the shadows, unable to escape. I didn't know what it wanted, but I was certain it wasn't good. I backed away from the door and quickly locked it. My legs felt like jelly, my entire body trembling as I leaned against the wall. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but the words wouldn't come. It was as if something in the air had stolen my voice. Then, I remembered the phone. The strange messages. The voice on the other end. "You're running out of time." I picked it up again, my hand shaking as I scrolled through the messages. My mind felt foggy, disconnected, like I was no longer in control. But I had to keep going. I had to understand. I opened the last message, the one that had come just moments ago. It was short, but the words sent a fresh wave of fear crashing over me. It's already inside. Don't fight it. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What did it mean? What was inside? The figure in the hall? Or something worse? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. The silence outside my door was deafening. The longer I sat there, the more I could feel the pressure building. Something was moving, waiting, like a predator circling its prey. I had to leave, but where could I go? The only thing that felt certain now was the gnawing sense of time slipping away. Whatever I had lost in those days, it was coming for me. And it wasn't alone. I sat motionless, my eyes fixed on the door, the faint thudding of my heart louder than anything else. Every inch of the apartment felt like it was closing in on me, the walls pressing tighter, the shadows growing longer. The figure in the hallway still lingered in my mind, a nightmare I couldn't shake off. The minutes dragged by, stretching into an eternity. I could hear nothing now, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I was frozen in place, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. The silence was crushing, and every creak of the apartment settling made my pulse spike. Then, a sound, a soft whisper, barely audible. It came from behind me, from somewhere within the room. I turned sharply, but there was no one there. The apartment, the hallway, everything seemed to have returned to its stillness. But I could feel it. A presence. Something in the air. It was as though the very space around me had shifted, thickened, and I was no longer alone. I stood up abruptly, my legs unsteady. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of the apartment, but I was paralyzed by the growing terror that I couldn't outrun whatever this was. I had no answers, no direction. Just an overwhelming need to understand what was happening. The phone buzzed again, cutting through the silence. I almost didn't want to check it. Part of me was afraid of what I might read. But I had no choice. I unlocked the screen. The message was waiting for me, just as I feared. I know you can hear it. It's getting closer. I dropped the phone in shock, the words echoing in my mind. My breathing quickened, my thoughts scattered. It was as if the message had been written specifically for me, a warning, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my own apartment. The room felt colder, and a new noise began to fill the air, subtle at first. It was a soft scratching sound, like nails running along the floor just behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing there, no creature, no figure, only the empty, dim-lit room. I backed away, my breath ragged in my throat, my mind scrambling for a way out, any way out. But the apartment seemed to stretch and shift, the layout not quite right. The hallways felt longer than before, the doorways narrower. I had been here countless times, but now everything was unfamiliar, distorted, as though the very fabric of the space was warping. Suddenly, there was a movement, a shadow slipping across the wall, just at the corner of my vision. My head whipped around, but once again, I saw nothing. My body was trembling now, adrenaline coursing through me. I had to get out. I didn't know where to go, but I had to leave. There was no escaping the feeling that something was following me, moving just behind me in the darkness, waiting for the right moment. The whispering started again, this time louder. It wasn't just a voice. It was a chorus of whispers, overlapping, frantic, each one unintelligible but filled with an undeniable sense of urgency. They were all around me, just out of reach, like 1,000 voices from the walls. I stumbled backward, my feet colliding with something hard. I looked down. It was the kitchen chair I had left behind earlier. I hadn't remembered placing it there, but it was there now, and it felt wrong, out of place. Like the apartment itself, it had become a twisted version of the familiar. I turned to leave the room, but as I moved toward the door, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure, standing just at the edge of the hallway, bathed in darkness. Its shape was vague, its features obscured, but it was tall, too tall, its limbs impossibly long. And it was watching me. I froze, my body unwilling to obey. The whispers grew louder, now almost deafening. The figure began to move toward me, its movements jerky, unnatural. Each step it took seemed to drag the very air with it, pulling at the edges of reality. The air turned thick with an oppressive energy, suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in. The figure stepped into the light. Its face, or what I assumed was its face, was a blur of shadows, its eyes glowing with an unnatural, dim light. It didn't speak, but I could hear it in my mind, a voice that wasn't mine, that wasn't human. "You can't escape." The floor beneath me cracked, a deep, groaning sound that rattled the walls. And suddenly, I was no longer in control. My body moved on its own toward the figure, as if it were being drawn by some invisible force. I tried to fight it, but the whispers, the presence, it was all too much. And then, I felt it, cold hands, thin and skeletal, grasping at my wrists, pulling me closer. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the figure's face, inches from mine, its eyes now wide open, unblinking. And then, everything went black. I woke up with a gasp, my body jerking upright as though I had been yanked from a deep, suffocating void. For a moment, everything was still. My breath came in sharp, shallow gasps, and my heart pounded in my chest, the echoes of the figure's face still haunting the edges of my vision. I was back in my apartment. But something was different. I blinked, trying to shake off the fog that clouded my mind. The walls, once distorted and closing in, now appeared as they should, ordinary. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall, everything was back to normal. The oppressive weight of the air had lifted, but the sense of unease was still there, lingering like a shadow in the corners of my mind. I stood up slowly, testing my legs, unsure of whether they would support me. I could feel a cold sweat on my skin, and my hands shook as I reached for the nearest light switch. The room flooded with light, but it did little to ease the sense of dread that clung to me. I looked around, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of the silence. It was almost as if I had returned to this place after a long time, but I couldn't remember how much time had passed. My mind, once sharp and clear, felt muddled, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. The days I had lost were still missing, and now they seemed even further out of reach. I went to the phone. It was silent now, no messages, no missed calls. But I could still feel it, the connection to something that wasn't quite right. Something that had been there before, something that was still lurking beneath the surface, waiting. I hesitated for a long moment, then dialed the first number from the strange calls. It rang once, twice, then a voice answered. "Hello?" The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you call me?" There was a pause, then the voice responded, softer this time, almost concerned. "You don't remember, do you?" My chest tightened. The words were like a cold, familiar sting. "I don't." I stammered, unsure of what to say. "What happened? What is going on?" The voice didn't answer at first. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end before it spoke again, slower, with an eerie calmness. "It's not over," the voice said. "You've come back, but it's not over. You need to leave. You need to get out before it finds you again." My stomach dropped. "What's going to find me?" The voice didn't respond immediately, but the hesitation was enough. I could hear the rustling of papers in the background, the sounds of someone trying to think fast. Then, the voice came back, more urgent now. "You're not the first," it whispered. "And you won't be the last. It's always been here, hiding in the corners. Waiting." But now, it's awake. A cold chill ran through me as the line went dead. I stood there, my fingers gripping the phone, my mind racing. What did it mean? Who was that? And what was it? Was the thing I had seen in the hallway, was that real? Had I truly been pulled into something, or was it all just a twisted dream? I couldn't stay here. The air felt heavy again, thick with the sensation of being watched. The apartment, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Something had followed me back, and it was waiting. I grabbed my jacket and bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my chest as I fumbled with the lock. As soon as I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap to the face. But it wasn't enough to calm the unease building inside me. Every shadow felt deeper, more threatening. Every sound felt like a warning. I started walking, moving as fast as I could, not sure where I was going, just knowing that I had to get away. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, my senses on high alert. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was no one there. Then I heard it, a soft scraping noise, like footsteps falling just behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but the street was empty. There was no one there. Only the faint hum of distant traffic, the sound of my own breathing. But the sound didn't stop. The scraping continued, closer now, and I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. The sensation of being hunted. I broke into a run, not daring to look back, my legs carrying me through the dark streets. The whispers from before echoed in my mind. It's always been here, hiding in the corners. Waiting. The further I ran, the more the shadows seemed to stretch out in front of me, like dark tendrils reaching for me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. What had I lost in those missing days? What had I done? And why did it feel like I was being drawn into something from which there was no escape? I glanced over my shoulder again. Nothing. But the sound was still there. Louder now. A dragging, scraping noise. I wasn't alone. And no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun what was waiting. It was closer than I thought. I didn't dare to slow down. My legs burned, my breath came in ragged gasps, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep running. I had to get as far away as possible, even though deep down, I knew it was pointless. The scraping sound followed me, closer with each step. It was as if the very air around me had been distorted, thickened, pulled into something unnatural. My mind screamed for answers, but every corner I turned, every street I crossed, only deepened the feeling of being trapped in a nightmare with no end. I turned again, almost expecting to see something or someone behind me, but the street was empty, as it had been for what felt like hours. The moon hung high in the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement, but even the light seemed wrong, too dim, too distant, as though it was fading, just like the world around me. Then, in the distance, I saw it, a figure, standing at the far end of the street, motionless. I couldn't make out its features, but I knew it was the same thing from before. The shadow that had stalked me in the apartment. The thing that had waited in the hallway. I froze, unable to move. It wasn't walking toward me, but it didn't need to. It was already here, already inside my mind. My pulse quickened, and for the first time since it all started, I felt the full weight of the realization there was no escaping it. There never had been. I turned to run again, but the street seemed endless now. The buildings around me blurred, twisting and shifting like they were folding in on themselves. The sound of the scraping had turned into something worse, chattering teeth, clicking and snapping, filling the air with an unsettling rhythm. The whispers joined in again, louder now, a chorus of voices, each one more desperate than the last. I could feel it now. It wasn't just following me, it was inside my mind. It was feeding on my fear, on my confusion, twisting everything into something unrecognizable. I collapsed to my knees, the world spinning around me. My thoughts were fractured, like shattered glass, each one cutting into me, pulling me deeper into the void. But then, a voice broke through the chaos. It wasn't the voice from the phone, but it was familiar. "You've been running for too long." I tried to scream, to say something, but the words wouldn't come. The figure in front of me began to move, its shape shifting and contorting as it approached. Its face, if it even had one, was still a blur of shadows, but now I could see it more clearly. It wasn't a person. It was something else. Something ancient. Something that had always been here, watching. "You can't outrun yourself," the voice said, and the words pierced me like a blade. "This is your past catching up to you. This is what you've done. This is what you've forgotten." The truth crashed down on me like a wave, drowning me. It was all real. The missing days, the strange messages, the figure in the hallway, they had all been pieces of something I had tried to block out, something I had tried to forget. The time I had lost wasn't just a memory, it was a part of me, a part of something I had done, something I had unleashed. I had been running from the consequences of my own actions, but now there was no escape. The figure was almost on me now, its presence consuming everything. The whispers turned into a roar, a deafening crescendo. The air around me vibrated with energy, and the ground beneath me cracked, splitting open like a wound. I looked up at the figure, and for the first time, I saw its eyes, pale, empty, hollow. They stared down at me with a cold, infinite knowledge, as though it knew everything about me, every decision, every mistake, every lost moment. And then, I understood. It wasn't just a creature from the shadows. It was a reflection of everything I had pushed away. My fear, my guilt, my regrets. It had always been with me. Waiting. Watching. I tried to speak, but no words came. The figure reached out with long, skeletal hands, and as it touched me, time fractured. I felt everything, the past, the present, the future, twist together into a single, unrelenting moment. Then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my apartment. The same place I had started. The same walls, the same silence. But there was no escape from the truth now. I looked around. The room was empty. No calls. No messages. Nothing. And yet, I could feel it. It was still here, lurking in the corners, waiting. The shadows were deepening again, the silence pressing in, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never escape. Time had lost its meaning. And so had I. Have you ever felt like something in your life doesn't quite belong? Like a piece of a puzzle that doesn't fit, but you're not sure where it goes or how it even appeared? That's how I felt when I first saw the door. It wasn't like I was looking for it. I wasn't exploring the apartment, expecting to find something hidden. No. I had just moved into the old flat on the edge of the city, seeking some peace and a break from the rush of life. The place seemed perfect for that, quiet, secluded, with just the right amount of worn charm. The landlord had been strangely distant, almost like he was eager to hand over the keys and be done with it. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, it was just a small, forgotten part of the city. Or so I thought. The door wasn't on the floor plan. I'd only noticed it by accident. I had been carrying a box of books into the apartment when I brushed up against a wall in the hallway, something feeling off in the way the paint had faded. It was subtle, but it caught my attention. I turned to inspect it, and there it was, a door I hadn't seen before. It was tucked in the corner of the hallway, partially hidden behind a narrow bookshelf I placed there the day before. I don't know why, but I couldn't ignore it. It wasn't just the door itself that intrigued me. It was the way it felt. As if it was a part of the apartment that had been kept hidden, something that hadn't been used in years, or maybe even longer. I ran my hand over the old, chipped wood, and I could almost hear a faint creak, like the house itself was holding its breath. I tried the handle. It was locked, of course. But that didn't stop me. Something in me pushed me to find out what was behind it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the strange sense of being watched, even though I was alone. It felt like there was something, someone, on the other side, waiting for me. I didn't even hesitate. I found a small key in one of the kitchen drawers. I didn't know where it had come from, but it fit the lock perfectly. With a deep breath, I turned the key. The door creaked open. The room beyond was dark, the air stale and thick, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I stepped in cautiously. The walls were covered in thick dust, and the floorboards creaked under my weight. The room was small, barely big enough to be considered a storage closet, but what struck me were the walls. They were covered in photographs. Hundreds of them. I took a step closer, wiping the dust off a nearby frame. The photo inside was of me, but it wasn't. It was a moment from my past, a picture I remembered, but the setting was completely different. I was standing in front of a cafe, one I had never been to, in clothes I had never worn. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the image. I turned to look at another frame. The next photograph was even more disturbing. There I was, standing by a park bench, my back to the camera, but it wasn't a place I recognized. It was a park I'd never visited, surrounded by trees I didn't know, under a sky that felt wrong. The moment was so vivid, so real, but I could feel the panic rising in my chest. How was this possible? How were these photos of me in places I had never been? I stepped back, a cold shiver running down my spine. I had to leave. I was about to turn when I noticed something on the floor, partially hidden behind an old trunk. Another photo. This one was different. It was a picture of me lying on the floor, my face pale, eyes wide open, dead. I recognized the room instantly. It was the apartment I had just moved into. I dropped the photo in shock. My mind raced as I stumbled back, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. The room felt colder, darker now. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I fumbled to leave, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the photographs that seemed to follow me with their silent, accusing stares. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, making my heart stop. I wasn't alone anymore. I spun around. The door was still open, but the hallway was empty. I ran for the exit, but the photographs haunted me. Every step felt heavier, the air thicker, as though the apartment was alive, watching me, waiting for me to understand. But I couldn't understand. Not yet. As I slammed the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, I realized one terrifying truth: someone, or something, was keeping these memories. But they weren't my memories. And that meant I was part of something far darker than I could have ever imagined. The room was still waiting. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to put it out of my mind, telling myself it was just the aftermath of what I found in that room. But the unease, the growing sense of dread, was impossible to ignore. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning in the silence of my apartment, my eyes flicking to the hallway where the door had once been. The next day, I tried to continue as if nothing had happened. I went to work, trying to convince myself that it was just a trick of my imagination. I had never been one for superstition, and the rational part of me kept pushing back against the idea that there was anything sinister about the photographs. But when I returned home that evening, something was off. The door to the room was ajar. I was sure I had locked it. I'd even checked twice before leaving. Yet now it stood there, open, as if it had never been closed. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt heavier, colder, and the silence was unnerving. It was as though the room was waiting for me to step inside, to uncover more of whatever twisted secret it held. I hesitated. Should I go in again? What if I was just imagining things? What if it wasn't real? But then, a voice, barely a whisper, echoed from within the room. Come closer. I froze. The voice was soft, almost familiar, but I couldn't place it. It sent a chill through me, a sense of deep unease crawling under my skin. Slowly, my feet moved forward, my hand trembling as it reached for the door. It opened fully as if someone, had been waiting for me to take that step. I stepped inside. The room was as I had left it, but now something felt different. The photographs were still on the walls, but there were more of them. More faces, more places, each one more unsettling than the last. The room was as I had left it, but now something felt different. The photographs were still on the walls, but there were more of them. More faces, more places, each one more unsettling than the last. Some were of me, standing in rooms I had never entered, at events I had never attended. Others showed moments I couldn't even remember experiencing. But then, I saw something new. A photograph on the floor, partially obscured behind a chair. I bent down and picked it up. The moment I looked at it, my breath caught in my throat. It was a photo of me, sitting in this very room. But I wasn't alone. There was a figure standing just behind me, their face obscured by shadows, their hands gripping my shoulders. I couldn't see who it was, but something about the image felt wrong. The figure felt too real, too present, as if they were right there with me, even though I was alone. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the hallway, snapping me out of my trance. My heart raced as I spun toward the door, expecting to see someone standing there. But the hallway was empty. Just the shadows stretching long in the dim light. I turned back to the room, but something was different now. The photographs had shifted. The faces in the frames seemed to be looking at me, their expressions frozen in a way that made my skin crawl. I tried to step away, but my feet felt heavy, as if they were stuck to the floor. Then, I heard it again. A whisper, this time louder. Closer. Look. I didn't want to. I didn't want to see what was coming next, but something compelled me to turn around. And there, in the reflection of the window, I saw it. A figure, standing just behind me, its face twisted and distorted, eyes wide open, staring directly at me. I gasped and spun around, but the room was empty. My breathing was erratic, my mind racing. What was happening? Who was that? I ran to the door, but before I could reach the handle, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. Stay, they urged. You haven't seen it all yet. I slammed the door shut, my hand shaking as I locked it. I didn't know what was real anymore. The photographs, the voices, the figure, everything was slipping through my fingers like sand. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave. I needed answers. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was no escaping this room. No running from what it held. The photographs, the memories, they weren't mine, but they were tied to me somehow, woven into the fabric of my life, just out of reach. And if I wasn't careful, I might become just another moment captured on one of those frames, my memory erased, my life lost to the room. I backed away from the door, my pulse racing. The silence that followed was deafening, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. The night passed in a haze. I didn't sleep, didn't move from my spot on the couch, as if somehow staying still would keep the room and whatever was in it at bay. But the silence felt suffocating, more oppressive than the whispers and shadows that lingered in my mind. The next morning, I woke up, disoriented, with the lingering taste of panic in my mouth. The light from the window was too bright, too harsh, and for a moment, I almost forgot what had happened. But then, the memory came flooding back, the photographs, the whispers, the figure in the reflection. I had to get out. I grabbed my things and left the apartment, taking the stairs two at a time, desperate for air, for normalcy. I thought maybe a walk around the city would help clear my head. The streets were busy, people bustling about with their lives, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't really part of it anymore. As if something inside me had already slipped into that dark room and I was just a spectator now. When I returned to the apartment that evening, the door was open again. I didn't want to go inside. I tried to ignore it, to push the door shut and leave it behind. But the pull of the room was too strong. It called to me, and I found myself stepping inside, despite every warning bell in my head telling me not to. The photographs had changed again. More had appeared, new ones, depicting moments I could not recognize. A photograph of me standing by the window, staring out into a stormy sky. Another of me sitting in a cafe, my coffee untouched, my gaze distant. But what stood out were the faces. Strangers. People I had never seen, yet they seemed so familiar. Their eyes, those eyes, were staring right at me, as if they knew me, as if they had always known me. I moved closer, my hands trembling as I ran my fingers over the frames. One of the photographs made my heart skip. There, in the corner of the image, was a figure standing by the door of the room. A man, his face blurred, but his posture rigid. He was watching me, but I had never seen him before. As I stared at the photo, a sharp knock on the door broke my concentration. My heart jumped in my chest. Who could be there? The building was quiet, and I hadn't expected visitors. I slowly approached the door, my breath shallow. I knew I wasn't alone in the room. I could feel it, the pressure, the presence of something unseen. But I couldn't just ignore whoever was at the door. I opened it cautiously. Standing in the hallway were two people, a man and a woman. They looked ordinary enough, but there was something in their eyes, something unsettling. Their expressions were blank, but not in a way that suggested boredom. It was as if they were waiting for something to happen. "We need to talk," the man said, his voice flat, almost rehearsed. I felt an odd shiver run down my spine. "Who are you?" The woman spoke next, her voice soft but insistent. "We're here about the room." I froze. My mind raced. How did they know about it? How did they know what I had discovered? I don't understand, I whispered. What do you mean? How do you know about the room? The man exchanged a glance with the woman before stepping inside, bypassing me as though it was perfectly natural. She followed, her gaze never leaving mine. I closed the door behind them, my heart pounding. How do you know about it? I asked again, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. The man looked at me like he had all the time in the world. It's not just your memories in that room. They're ours too. And they'll be yours soon if you're not careful. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes wide and distant. We came to warn you. You're not the first. And you won't be the last. A chill spread through me, cold and sharp. Warn me about what? They both turned toward the door of the room. You've seen it, haven't you? The woman said, her voice trembling now. You've seen the photographs, the moments you never lived. But you will. You live them, whether you want to or not. I felt my stomach twist. The photos. They weren't just capturing moments from my life. They were showing my future. Or maybe something worse. Something I couldn't control. What happens if I don't go back? I asked, barely able to speak. The man's eyes darkened. The room won't let you leave. It'll take what it needs. And if you don't, it will keep taking. The woman stepped forward, her face now filled with fear. You have to destroy it. You have to destroy the photographs before they take over. I looked at them both, the fear in their eyes now matching my own. I didn't want to believe them, but I couldn't deny the truth. The room, the photographs, they weren't just some twisted coincidence. They were part of something far darker, something that had been waiting. I backed away, my heart racing. How do I stop it? I whispered, the weight of their words sinking in. The man's voice was a low warning. You can't. Not unless you're willing to give up what's in those photographs. I was left standing in the room, the photographs watching me, waiting for me to make my choice. The whispers grew louder, as though the walls themselves were closing in. There was no turning back now. The air in the room thickened. It felt as though the very walls were closing in on me, pressing down with a weight I could hardly breathe under. The photographs on the walls, my life, the lives of strangers, stared down at me, their faces unblinking, their eyes following my every move. The man and the woman were gone. I hadn't seen them leave, hadn't heard them exit through the door. It was as if they had never been there at all. But their words echoed in my mind. You have to destroy it. You have to destroy the photographs before they take over. I glanced around the room again, my eyes landing on the photo I'd found on the floor earlier, the one with the blurry figure standing behind me. The figure in the shadows seemed to be watching me still, a presence that made my skin crawl. I could almost feel its eyes on me, as if it was waiting for me to make my next move. The choice loomed over me like a dark cloud. Destroy the photographs? But how could I? The room seemed to have a life of its own, shifting and changing with each passing moment. Every picture I looked at felt like a part of me, a part of my past, my future. But the longer I stayed, the more I began to realize this wasn't just a room of memories. It was something far darker, something that fed on the people who stepped inside, consuming them piece by piece. I had already felt its grip on me, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The photographs seemed to hum with a quiet energy, as if they were alive, watching, waiting. I had to do something, anything, to get out of this place before it swallowed me whole. I reached for one of the frames, my fingers brushing against the cold glass. The photo inside showed me sitting at a kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of me. The scene was ordinary, yet I didn't recognize the place, the people in the background. My hand shook as I lifted the frame, my eyes never leaving the image. Was this a memory? Or a future? Suddenly, a sharp crack sounded from behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. There, in the doorway, stood the figure from the photo, the blurry man. His face was still obscured by shadows, but I could feel his presence as if he was right there, standing next to me. His eyes, dark and cold, fixed on mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw something shift in the reflection of the glass. A fleeting glimpse of my own face, twisted in fear. I dropped the frame. It shattered on the floor. The room seemed to tremble, the walls vibrating with a low hum. The photographs began to shift, their images distorting. The faces of the strangers, the people I didn't know, started to move, their eyes following me, their expressions changing. I could hear faint whispers now, growing louder, more insistent. Stay. Look closer. You don't have a choice. I backed away, my hands trembling, my mind racing. How could this be happening? How could these photos, these memories, were they even memories at all, hold so much power? I turned and fled from the room, the photographs still chasing me with their eyes, their whispers. I ran down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence, my heart thundering in my chest. But as I reached the front door, something stopped me. A voice. Not a whisper, but a command. You can't leave. The door slammed shut before I could touch the handle. The sound was deafening, and I stumbled backward, my body colliding with the wall. Panic surged through me, my pulse racing. How was this happening? How could the room know? I turned back, my eyes scanning the hallway, but there was no one there. The apartment felt suffocating now, the air thick with something other, something that wasn't real. The walls seemed to close in even more. And then, the photographs that weren't mine, began to change again. I saw myself, younger, standing in the doorway to this very room, but I wasn't alone. There was someone with me, someone familiar, but I couldn't place them. Their face was blurry, distorted, but the way they stood beside me, their hand on my shoulder, filled me with a sense of dread. I knew the truth now. I had been in this room before. I had seen these photographs before. I had seen this moment, and yet I couldn't remember it, couldn't place it in my mind. I was trapped. The photographs weren't just memories, they were pieces of my life, pieces of me. But I had never lived those moments. I had never chosen them. They had been taken, stolen from me. And now, the room was taking everything. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. My body moved of its own accord, my feet carrying me back toward the room. There was no escaping it now. I had become part of the photographs. I stumbled inside, the door closing behind me with a final, crushing sound. The room was alive with the sounds of whispers, with the echoes of footsteps, with the weight of all the lives it had stolen. I wasn't just trapped in the room anymore. I was part of it. And the photographs, those cold, unblinking eyes, were all that remained of me. Have you ever heard a sound that seemed to seep into your very soul? One that pulls at the strings of your heart and makes your skin prickle with unease? I had never considered the possibility until that fateful afternoon in the park. It was an ordinary day. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting dappled shadows on the worn path that wound through the trees. Families laughed and played, the scent of blooming flowers wafted through the air, and the world felt vibrant, alive. Yet, amid all this, I felt a gnawing discomfort. A strange pull beckoned me to a secluded corner of the park, away from the laughter and light. As I approached, I heard it, a melody, soft at first, like a whisper carried by the wind. It was beautiful, yet there was something unsettling about it. Each note felt familiar yet foreign, like a half-remembered dream. I stood there, entranced, as the music enveloped me, a haunting lullaby that seemed to echo through the very trees around me. I returned to that spot day after day. The melody would greet me, welcoming yet increasingly unsettling. It morphed with each visit, adding layers of sound that clung to my mind. Sometimes it sounded like laughter, other times it morphed into a mournful wail that chilled me to the bone. The more I listened, the more I felt an inexplicable fear creep into my heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the park, I decided to venture deeper into the trees, drawn by the song. The light faded, and the surroundings transformed. The gentle rustle of leaves shifted to a more pronounced sound, sharp and jagged. A sudden chill swept through the air, causing goosebumps to erupt on my arms. Then, I noticed something else, a faint rustling, as if something were moving just beyond my line of sight. I turned, but there was nothing there. The trees stood still, their trunks thick and imposing, their branches clawing at the sky. The music continued, and I felt its presence growing, wrapping around me like a serpent ready to strike. With each step I took, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, becoming more defined. A creeping dread settled in my stomach. What was this melody trying to tell me? Why did it feel like it was drawing me closer to something unknown? My heart raced, and I turned to leave, but the song wrapped tighter around me, almost pleading for me to stay. As I retraced my steps, the sound shifted again. It was now punctuated by what sounded like footsteps echoing behind me, heavy and deliberate. I glanced back, half expecting to see someone following, but the path was empty. I quickened my pace, the melody now turning sinister, twisting my very thoughts. Could this be a trick of the mind? I was alone in the park, yet I felt the presence of something else. The trees whispered secrets I couldn't decipher, and the ground felt alive beneath my feet. I reached the edge of the park, my breath coming in quick gasps, the melody still reverberating in my mind. I paused to look back, but the shadows seemed to stretch further, enveloping the path I had just fled. I was safe now, but the memory of that song would linger long after I had left. It was just a melody, I tried to convince myself, but deep down, I knew it was something more, something that would change me forever. As I made my way home, the haunting notes echoed in my ears, intertwining with the ambient sounds of the evening. I had survived the night, but I could feel the grip of something deeper clawing at the edges of my sanity. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. That night, I lay in bed, the melody swirling in my mind like a storm. I tried to drown it out with the familiar sounds of my home, the creaking floorboards, the distant hum of traffic, and the soft rustle of the wind outside. But the song had woven itself into the fabric of my thoughts, a relentless echo that refused to fade. As I closed my eyes, I found myself drawn back to the park. The shadows from that evening seemed to linger, dancing just beyond my vision. I could almost hear the faint whispers of the trees, calling out to me, urging me to return. I shook my head, pushing the thoughts away. I had to be rational. It was just a melody, nothing more. But as the night deepened, the atmosphere shifted. The familiar sounds of my home faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. I could hear my own heartbeat, the steady thump matching the rhythm of the melody. It was as if the song had seeped into my very bones, a sinister reminder of the encounter. Suddenly, a soft rustle outside my window made me sit up. I strained to listen, my heart pounding. The wind had picked up, and I could hear it whispering through the trees outside, but there was something else, something that sounded like a voice, barely above a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, almost pleading. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and walked to the window, peering into the darkness. The park loomed beyond my backyard, the shadows of the trees stretching like skeletal fingers against the moonlit sky. I felt a pull, an invisible thread connecting me to that melody. I knew I shouldn't go back, but curiosity gnawed at me. As I stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around me, a stark contrast to the warmth of my home. The path to the park was familiar, yet it felt different under the cloak of night. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground itself was resisting my presence. When I arrived, the park was shrouded in darkness, the moonlight casting an eerie glow on the twisting branches. The melody was there, now softer, almost a lullaby, but with an undercurrent of something darker. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stood there, heart racing. The air thickened, and the shadows deepened. Then I heard it again, the rustling sound, closer this time. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to look, but once again, there was nothing but the night. The trees stood tall and silent, yet the song persisted, growing louder, more insistent. It seemed to beckon me deeper into the park, promising answers I wasn't sure I wanted. I took a hesitant step forward, and the ground crunched beneath my feet, echoing in the stillness. The melody morphed again, intertwining with the whispers that danced around me. "Come closer," they seemed to say, the words drifting just out of reach. My pulse quickened, and I felt a mixture of fear and fascination. Then, just beyond a cluster of trees, I saw a flicker of light, a soft, pulsing glow. It seemed to pulse in time with the melody, as if the very essence of the song was manifesting before me. I approached cautiously, drawn to the light like a moth to a flame. As I moved closer, the air grew colder, and the shadows twisted, almost alive. I stepped into the clearing, and there it was, a figure, barely visible, cloaked in shadow, illuminated by the pulsating light. It was as if the very essence of the melody had taken form, a specter woven from notes and whispers. I felt a chill seep into my bones, paralyzing me in place. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure turned slowly, and I felt the weight of its gaze. There was a sense of recognition, a familiarity that sent a jolt of fear through me. The figure raised a hand, and the melody swelled, filling the air with a haunting beauty. The notes cascaded around me, wrapping me in an embrace both comforting and terrifying. I realized then that I was standing at the edge of something far beyond my understanding, a threshold between my world and something otherworldly. As the figure began to move, the shadows coalesced around it, forming shapes that flickered in and out of existence. I could see faces, twisted, anguished, and yet filled with longing. They seemed to reach out, their silent screams echoing in my mind. My heart raced, and I knew I had to turn back. But as I stepped away, the melody shifted once more, darkening, pressing in around me. The whispers grew louder, an urgent chorus that clawed at my sanity. "You cannot escape," they seemed to say. "The song has begun." Panic surged through me as I stumbled back, but the shadows shifted, blocking my path. I felt the presence of the figure drawing closer, and the weight of its gaze bore down on me. The night had transformed, the familiar park now a twisted labyrinth of fear. With every ounce of will, I turned and fled, the melody echoing in my ears, chasing me into the darkness. I burst through the trees, desperate for the safety of the light, but I knew deep down that I had crossed a line. The song would not let me go so easily. As I reached my home, breathless and trembling, I slammed the door shut behind me, leaning against it as if to keep the darkness at bay. But even as I stood there, the melody played on, haunting and relentless, a song without an end, forever echoing in the corners of my mind. The next day dragged on, each hour stretching into eternity. I tried to convince myself that the encounter was nothing more than a nightmare, a trick of the mind fueled by my fears. But as the sun set and darkness encroached, the melody crept back into my thoughts, entwining itself around my reason. I avoided the park, choosing instead to walk through the bustling streets filled with chatter and life. But even the laughter of children and the cheerful sounds of conversation felt hollow, like a distant echo of joy I could no longer grasp. I was trapped in my own mind, a prisoner of the haunting song that seemed to play on an endless loop. That evening, I sat on my bed, attempting to read a book, but the words blurred together as the melody played on repeat in my head. Each note was a reminder of the figure in the park, the shadows, and the faces that had reached out to me. I felt their desperation, their yearning for release, and it filled me with dread. I picked up my phone, seeking distraction. Scrolling through social media, I found nothing that could pull me from the abyss of my thoughts. I stumbled upon a post about a missing person in our area, a young woman last seen near the park. My heart sank as I read the details. The photo looked familiar, and the name sent chills down my spine. I remembered her face from the whispers in the shadows. Had she become one of the figures I saw? A part of me wanted to reach out to the authorities, to tell them about the melody, the figure, and the faces. But who would believe me? I could barely convince myself of the reality of what I had experienced. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, the shadows of my room twisting and turning, merging with the melody that still echoed in my ears. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, I made a decision. I had to return to the park, not just to face this song, but to confront whatever lay hidden within the darkness. As dawn broke, I stepped outside, the early light casting a fragile glow over the world. The park was quiet, almost serene, but the weight of anticipation hung heavy in the air. Each step toward the familiar path felt like walking into a trap, but I pressed on, driven by a desperate need for answers. When I arrived, the trees stood silent, their branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill of the air cut through me. The melody was faint but still present, tugging at the edges of my consciousness. I followed the sound, my heart pounding as I ventured deeper into the woods. The clearing where I had encountered the figure was just ahead. As I approached, I could feel the air thickening, heavy with tension. The shadows were longer now, stretching out like fingers across the ground. I hesitated for a moment, but the song began to swell, urging me forward. Stepping into the clearing, I felt an electric charge in the air, as if the very atmosphere was alive with anticipation. The light pulsed softly, and I could see the figure once more, standing amidst the swirling shadows. This time, it appeared more defined, the contours of its form sharpening as if it had been waiting for me. "What do you want?" I shouted, the fear rising in my throat. "Why are you doing this?" The figure turned slowly, its face obscured in shadow, yet I felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity wash over me. The melody grew louder, each note vibrating through my bones. I could almost hear words hidden within the music, a language I didn't understand yet felt compelled to decipher. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, and the faces emerged once more, flickering in and out of existence. They reached out toward me, their expressions twisted in anguish. I felt their sorrow, their need for release. "Help us," they whispered, their voices the chilling chorus. I took a step back, panic clawing at my throat. "Ow!" I cried. "What do you want me to do?" The figure raised a hand, and the melody shifted again, this time morphing into a chaotic cacophony that overwhelmed my senses. I clutched my head, the sound piercing through the fog of fear that enveloped me. Then, in an instant, silence fell, and I was left standing in the clearing, breathless and disoriented. The figure moved closer, and I felt a sudden rush of energy course through me. The shadows pulsed with life, swirling around us, and the air thickened with anticipation. I realized then that this was not just a melody, it was a plea for freedom, a connection between realms. "Face your fears," the figure finally spoke, its voice echoing like the music. "You must understand. Only then can we be released." My heart raced, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of understanding. I had been running from my own fears, my own darkness, and the song had been a mirror reflecting everything I had buried deep within. If I wanted to help them, I had to confront the shadows within myself. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes, allowing the melody to wash over me. I focused on the emotions that swirled within: fear, isolation, the weight of loss. The shadows around me thickened, whispering secrets I had long avoided. I surrendered to the music, letting it guide me deeper into the darkness I had feared. As I opened my eyes, I found myself standing at the crossroads of my own psyche, surrounded by swirling shadows that flickered with the faces of those lost. The melody pulsed, resonating with my very being, and I felt a surge of strength. Together, I whispered, "We will find a way." And with that declaration, the song transformed, rising into a crescendo that echoed through the clearing. The shadows began to shift, their anguished faces softening as if they could sense the shift within me. The melody had become a bridge, a connection between my fears and their release. As I reached out, the shadows enveloped me, and I felt a wave of energy surge through the air. In that moment, I realized that perhaps the endless song was not just a melody but a pathway to healing for both me and those trapped within the shadows. The music grew louder, a symphony of liberation, and I knew that together we could break the cycle of fear that bound us. The clearing pulsated with energy as the melody wrapped around us, a living entity resonating with the very essence of our collective fears. I stood at the center, my heart pounding, the shadows swirling like a tempest around me. Each flicker of light seemed to illuminate a fragment of the past, memories of pain, loss, and isolation. As I focused on this song, I felt an overwhelming urge to confront each shadow. They were not just specters of despair, they were echoes of unresolved emotions, fragments of lives intertwined with mine. I took a step forward, breathing deeply, grounding myself in the present. "I see you," I said softly, addressing the shadows. "You are not alone." The figures shifted, their expressions shifting from anguish to something more vulnerable. I sensed their hesitation, their longing for recognition, for release from the burdens they had carried for so long. With each note of the melody, I felt a connection, a thread weaving between our souls, drawing us closer. "Tell me your stories," I urged, my voice steadying as the song rose and fell. "Share your pain, your fears. Together, we can break free." One by one, the shadows began to emerge, their voices rising in a haunting harmony. I heard the echoes of their pasts, the sorrow of unfulfilled dreams, the weight of guilt, the crushing isolation of existence. Each tale unfurled like a delicate thread, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences and emotions. As they spoke, the melody transformed, each note resonating with their pain, becoming a balm that soothed the wounds of the past. I felt their energy coursing through me, amplifying my own resolve. I was no longer just an observer, I was a participant in this symphony of release. Let it go, I encouraged, the music swelling around us. You are not defined by your fears. You can be free. With every note, the shadows began to dissolve, their forms shifting and flickering as they released the burdens they had carried. I saw faces smiling, tears of joy mingling with sorrow as they embraced the release. The figures reached out to me, their gratitude palpable, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. But even as I reveled in this connection, a darker presence lingered at the edges of the clearing. I felt it watching, waiting, an embodiment of the fear I had long avoided. This was not just a confrontation with the past, it was a battle against the very essence of despair that sought to consume us all. I turned to face it, feeling the shadows shift behind me as the melody twisted into something darker. The figure emerged from the depths, its form looming and shadowy, eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity. It was a manifestation of everything I had feared, the unknown, the pain, the isolation. Do you think you can escape? It boomed, the voice resonating like thunder. You cannot free them. They are bound to me. My heart raced, and for a moment, I felt the weight of doubt creeping in. Could I really confront this darkness? But then I remembered the connections we had forged, the strength of the shadows standing with me. We are stronger together, I declared, my voice unwavering. Your hold over them ends now. The melody shifted once more, rising in defiance against the dark figure. I could feel the shadows rallying behind me, their energy merging with mine as we faced the embodiment of our fears. The music became a shield, a force that pushed back against the darkness threatening to swallow us whole. As the dark figure lunged forward, I raised my hands, channeling the energy of the melody into a wave of light. The shadows responded, intertwining with my resolve, creating a barrier that pulsed with the rhythm of our collective hopes. Release us. I shouted, and the melody erupted in a crescendo, flooding the clearing with a brilliant light. The dark figure recoiled, its form flickering as the shadows surged forward, merging into the light. I felt the weight of their despair lifting, a wave of liberation washing over me. The darkness writhed, shrieking as it was pulled into the light. I could sense the energy of the figures melding with the music, transforming the cacophony of fear into a harmonious symphony of release. The shadows dissolved, merging with the light, and the dark figure let out one final, anguished roar before shattering into 1,000 fragments. The clearing fell silent, and for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. The melody shifted again, now a gentle lullaby that caressed the air. I stood there, breathing in the tranquility, feeling the presence of those I had helped. With the darkness vanquished, the shadows transformed into shimmering lights, twinkling like stars in the clearing. They circled around me, whispering words of gratitude, their voices a soothing balm to my soul. I had faced my fears and, in doing so, had freed not just myself, but the echoes of those lost to the shadows. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, the melody faded into a soft hum, leaving behind an echo of warmth and light. I stood in the clearing, a part of something greater, a guardian of the song that would forever bind us together. But even as I reveled in this moment of victory, I knew that the journey was far from over. The song would continue, evolving with each new experience, each new fear faced. I had discovered a path to healing, not just for myself, but for all those who had danced with shadows. The endless song had become a tapestry of resilience, woven with threads of courage and connection. And as I turned to leave the clearing, I felt the melody pulse gently in my heart, a reminder that I was never truly alone. The shadows would always be there, but now they were a part of me, a testament to the strength found in confronting the darkness. And I would carry that melody with me, a song that echoed through the corridors of my soul, guiding me forward into the light. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. I walked through the park often, the melody now a comforting presence rather than a source of dread. The shadows had transformed into wisps of light, reminders of the struggles I had faced and the connections I had forged. Each visit brought a sense of peace, a reconnection with the beauty of life. Yet, even in this newfound serenity, I sensed an undercurrent of change. The park had transformed along with me. The trees felt more alive, their leaves shimmering in the sunlight, and the air carried a vibrancy that I had never noticed before. The laughter of children echoed more brightly, and the flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, each petal a testament to resilience. One afternoon, while wandering through the familiar paths, I paused at the edge of the clearing. I felt a gentle pull, as if the melody were beckoning me back to the center of the park. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the light, letting the warmth envelop me. As I stood there, the air shifted, and I sensed something new, a presence, subtle yet undeniable. I closed my eyes and listened. The melody was different now, infused with a richness that resonated deeply within me. It felt like a call to adventure, an invitation to explore beyond what I had known. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement, a figure emerging from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. My heart raced, but this time, instead of fear, I felt a surge of curiosity. The figure stepped forward, and I recognized the familiar contours, the shimmering essence that had become a part of my journey. It was the same figure I had confronted before, but now it appeared transformed, radiating a soft glow. "You have changed," it said, its voice like the gentle rustle of leaves. "You have faced your fears, and in doing so, you have awakened a new reality." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping closer, drawn by the light that surrounded it. "The melody continues to evolve, just as you do. There are others who have yet to confront their shadows, who are lost in the darkness. Your journey is not just for yourself, it is a call to help others awaken." My heart quickened at the realization. "You mean I can help them? I can guide them through their own darkness?" The figure nodded, its light flickering with excitement. "You have the power now, a connection to the song that flows through all living things. It is time to embrace this gift and share it with others." I felt a rush of determination. This was the purpose I had longed for, a way to transform my experience into something meaningful. "How do I start?" I asked, ready to embrace the challenge. "Listen to the melodies around you. Each person carries their own song, filled with hopes, fears, and dreams. Your task is to help them uncover it. Begin with those who are close to you, friends, family, anyone who needs guidance." As I stood there, a vision began to form in my mind. I saw familiar faces, those who had faced their own struggles, those still wrestling with their fears. I felt the pull of connection, the desire to share what I had learned. "I will help them," I promised. "I won't let their songs remain unheard." The figure smiled, its form shimmering as it stepped back into the shadows. "Remember, the song is always within you. Trust in it, and it will guide you." With that, the figure faded, leaving me alone in the clearing. But I no longer felt the weight of solitude. I felt empowered, filled with a newfound purpose. The melody hummed in my heart, and I knew that my journey was only just beginning. As I left the park, I was filled with a sense of clarity. I would seek out those who needed guidance, sharing my experience and helping them confront their shadows. Each person had their own story to tell, their own melody waiting to be uncovered. That evening, I called my friend Ethan, someone I knew had been struggling. I had watched him wrestle with his own fears for far too long. "Ethan, can we talk?" "I think I can help you," I said, my voice steady with conviction. He hesitated, but eventually agreed to meet. As I hung up, a sense of purpose filled me. I was ready to guide him, to help him face the shadows he had kept hidden. I could already hear the melody shifting in my mind, the promise of healing echoing softly. The next day, we met in the park. I led him to the clearing, the very spot where my journey had taken its transformative turn. The air felt charged with possibility as we sat on the grass, sunlight filtering through the leaves. "I've been meaning to talk to you," I began, gauging his reaction. "I know things have been tough, and I want you to know you're not alone." Ethan looked down, his brow furrowed. "I don't even know where to start. It all feels overwhelming." "Let's start here," I said gently, "with the music. You might not realize it, but you have your own song. It's okay to explore it, to share what's been weighing on you." He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You really think so?" I nodded. "Absolutely. And I'm here to help you through it. Together, we can face whatever shadows come up." As we talked, I guided him to close his eyes and listen. The melody of the park swirled around us, and I encouraged him to connect with his feelings, to let the music resonate within him. Gradually, he began to open up, sharing stories of anxiety, fear, and moments of doubt that had clouded his mind. Each word was a release, and I felt the energy shift around us. The shadows of his fears began to take shape, but instead of being monstrous, they transformed into something manageable, fragments of his experiences that could be understood. We spent hours in that clearing, weaving through his memories, allowing the melody to guide us. I shared my own experiences, and as we exchanged stories, I could feel the weight lifting from his shoulders. When we finally stood up, the sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the park. Ethan looked lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I didn't know I could face these things. I feel different." I smiled, knowing that the journey was only just beginning for him. "You've taken the first step. Remember, the song is always within you. Whenever you feel lost, just listen." As we walked back, I realized how powerful it felt to share this journey. The endless song wasn't just mine, it was a collective melody, a shared experience of humanity. With each person I helped, I could feel the echoes of their shadows merging with my own, creating a symphony of resilience. I was no longer just a listener, I was an active participant in the healing process. In the days that followed, I reached out to others, friends, acquaintances, even strangers who seemed to carry a heaviness in their hearts. I listened to their stories, encouraging them to embrace their shadows and find the melodies hidden within. As the park transformed with the seasons, so did the people I connected with. Each encounter deepened my understanding of the human experience, and the power of the song grew stronger within me. I had become a conduit for healing, a bridge between the light and the shadows. And through it all, the melody continued to resonate, a reminder that we are never truly alone in our struggles. The song would live on, an endless echo of hope and resilience, guiding us all toward the light. And so, the journey continued, a never-ending song, weaving through the fabric of our lives, binding us together in a harmonious tapestry of connection and understanding. What if the light you see in the woods isn't just a reflection of the sun? What if it holds secrets, mysteries waiting to be uncovered. I often wandered through the forest near my home, a tranquil escape from the chaos of daily life. The towering trees stood like ancient sentinels, their leaves whispering secrets in the wind. On one particularly ordinary afternoon, as I trekked along a familiar path, something unusual caught my eye. A bright light flickered between the trees, dancing like a firefly but far more intense. I paused, my heart racing. Curiosity and a hint of trepidation surged within me. What could it be? I took a step closer, drawn in by its radiant glow. As I approached, the light shimmered, casting ethereal patterns on the ground. The forest around me began to shift subtly. The familiar sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves faded into a soft, almost eerie silence. The sunlight, once warm and inviting, now felt distant, as if the trees themselves were leaning closer to hear the pulse of that strange light. I hesitated, a shiver of unease creeping down my spine. The air around me thickened, and with every step I took toward the glow, I felt as though time itself slowed, stretching into something unrecognizable. My surroundings blurred, and the edges of the forest began to ripple like water disturbed by a stone. Just a little closer, I whispered to myself, ignoring the voice of caution nagging at the back of my mind. The light beckoned, and I was powerless against its call. But then, something shifted in the air. A soft rustling echoed through the trees, like the whisper of footsteps. I turned sharply, scanning the underbrush. There was nothing there, just shadows that deepened with each passing moment. My heart pounded louder, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped me. I took another step forward, and the light pulsed as if responding to my presence. The ground felt uneven beneath my feet, the familiar path transforming into a chaotic mosaic of roots and fallen leaves. The moment felt surreal, as if I were crossing a threshold into another realm. Suddenly, the rustling intensified. I turned again, now feeling the unmistakable presence of something lurking just beyond my vision. Panic surged within me, but I couldn't pull my gaze from the radiant light. It was intoxicating, promising answers to questions I didn't even know I had. I was just a few steps away now. The light grew brighter, enveloping me in its glow. And then, with an abruptness that sent a jolt of fear through my core, it vanished. Darkness swallowed the clearing, leaving only the faintest traces of the brilliant hue that had mesmerized me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing into the stillness. There was no response, only the chilling sound of my own heartbeat. I stepped back, the shadows creeping around me like fingers, pulling me into their embrace. The forest felt different now. The air was heavy, charged with an unseen energy that prickled my skin. I could feel us watching me from the depths of the trees, and the rustling resumed, this time more deliberate, more menacing. "Is anyone there?" I shouted again, my voice trembling. Silence answered, but I sensed a presence closing in, an unseen force that sent a wave of dread coursing through me. I turned and began to retreat, the path I once knew now seeming foreign and twisted. My heart raced as I stumbled over roots and underbrush, my pulse echoing in my ears. With every step, the whispers grew louder, shifting from soft rustles to a cacophony of disembodied voices. The shadows morphed, and for a fleeting moment, I saw shapes, figures lurking just beyond the reach of the dim light filtering through the trees. Were they real, or was my mind playing tricks on me? As I quickened my pace, the light reappeared ahead, flickering in and out of existence, taunting me. It felt as though it was leading me deeper into the forest, pulling me away from the safety of the path. I wanted to resist, to turn back, but an inexplicable force pushed me onward. What awaited me at the end of this trail? With each heartbeat, my fear deepened. The trees closed in around me, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers, and the whispers transformed into a haunting melody that wove through the air. I felt trapped, ensnared in an unknown world that threatened to consume me. I had to find a way out. I turned back, determined to escape the growing dread. But the forest had changed. The path I had once known now seemed to twist and turn into a labyrinth of uncertainty. The light flickered once more, but this time it felt more like a warning, a lure that promised more than it could deliver. As I sprinted, I realized that the deeper I went, the more I was pulled into the heart of the forest, into a mystery that was far greater than I could comprehend. And then, just as the light flickered again, I felt a presence behind me, a shadow that loomed larger with each step I took. I turned to face it, heart racing, and in that moment, I understood that I was no longer just an observer in this enchanted forest. I was part of its story, caught in a web of light and shadow, struggling to navigate a reality where time and space no longer held their usual meaning. What lay ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: the forest had secrets, and I was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. I stood frozen, heart pounding, as the shadows seemed to coalesce into a form behind me. The presence felt tangible, heavy, like a thick fog that obscured both my vision and my senses. The whispers echoed in my mind, a chorus of voices that merged into a single, dissonant sound, calling me back to the light. I took a hesitant step forward, but the shadows shifted with me, closing the space between us. The light flickered again, drawing me like a moth to a flame, but I felt the chilling grasp of fear rooting me in place. I turned to face the path behind me, willing myself to retreat, but the forest had twisted into a labyrinth. The familiar route vanished. With a shaky breath, I turned to confront the looming darkness. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking under the weight of fear. The figure remained hidden, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the trees. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest. Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby, the sound piercing the silence. I jumped, adrenaline surging through me. Panic propelled me forward, and I sprinted into the depths of the forest, the path still obscured by the ever-shifting shadows. I could feel the presence behind me, relentless and close, urging me to flee deeper into the unknown. The air felt thick, suffocating, and the soft earth beneath my feet turned treacherous, roots grabbing at my ankles. Each heartbeat seemed to sync with the whispers, an ominous rhythm that echoed in the dark. I could barely see the ground ahead, and each step became a gamble, a dance with fate. Then, just ahead, I caught sight of the light again, shimmering through the trees like a beacon. I felt an inexplicable pull, a sense that it held the answers I desperately sought. I darted toward it, branches clawing in my arms, leaves rustling like the murmurs of unseen watchers. As I drew closer, the light enveloped me, and I stumbled into a small clearing. It was a space unlike anything I had ever seen, illuminated by the soft, ethereal glow. The trees around me stood tall and ancient, their trunks twisted and gnarled, with branches that seemed to weave into a tapestry of stars. In the center of the clearing was a pedestal of stone, adorned with strange symbols that glimmered in the light. My breath caught in my throat. This was no ordinary forest. I was standing at the threshold of something otherworldly. But as I stepped into the clearing, the shadows followed, merging with the light in a chaotic swirl. The once tranquil glow turned ominous, casting long, jagged shadows that danced around me. I felt the presence closing in, the weight of their gaze pressing against my skin. "Leave this place," a voice boomed suddenly, breaking through the whispers. It echoed like thunder, and I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet. I whirled around, searching for the source, but only shadows remained. The light flickered dangerously, and the air grew colder, wrapping around me like a shroud. I instinctively stepped back, my mind racing. This was a threshold, a point of no return. The light had lured me here, but now it felt like a trap. I could hear the whispers morphing into a chant, an incantation that beckoned me to stay, to surrender to the magic of this enchanted place. But a flicker of self-preservation ignited within me. I had to fight against the pull of the unknown. I turned again to the path I had taken, searching for an escape, but the shadows seemed to close in tighter, a living wall that barred my way. "Help!" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. I was engulfed by the shadows, the whispers now a cacophony of dread that echoed in my mind. The ground beneath me felt unstable, shifting like quicksand. I stumbled, losing my footing, and fell to the ground. In that moment of vulnerability, the shadows converged, forming a dark figure that loomed over me. I could see its features shifting, indistinct but terrifying. It leaned closer, and I felt a cold breath against my face, chilling me to the bone. "You seek the light, yet you fear the darkness," it hissed, its voice a serpentine whisper. "You cannot have both." I struggled to regain my composure, the cold seeping into my bones. "I don't want any of this," I shouted, the defiance in my voice surprising even me. "I just want to go home." The figure paused, its form wavering as if uncertain. The whispers quieted, replaced by an eerie stillness that felt almost hopeful. "Home is a fragile concept," it said slowly, the words dripping with a mixture of sadness and wisdom. "What do you seek, truly?" The question hung in the air, and I felt the weight of its significance. I thought about the life I had left behind, my routine, my fears, my sense of isolation. The forest had drawn me in, promising something beyond the mundane, yet now it felt like a prison. "I seek understanding," I admitted, my voice steadying. "I want to know why I am drawn to this light, what it means." The dark figure straightened, the shadows swirling around it like a cloak. "Then face your truth," it replied, its voice softer now, almost inviting. "The light reveals all, but it demands sacrifice. Are you willing to pay the price?" The light flickered again, and I felt a tug in my heart. It was the promise of answers, the allure of clarity in a world filled with uncertainty. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the air shift. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I will face whatever it is. I need to understand." As soon as the words left my lips, the dark figure stepped back, allowing the light to surge forward, enveloping me in its brilliance. The shadows receded, dissipating into nothingness, and the light embraced me, illuminating the clearing in a warm glow. For a moment, I was suspended in time, the world around me fading away. Memories washed over me, moments of joy, sadness, and fear. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely liberated. And then, as quickly as it began, the light dimmed, and I was left standing alone in the clearing, breathless. The shadows had vanished, but the air still hummed with energy, a promise of the mysteries yet to unfold. I had crossed a threshold, but the true journey was only beginning. The light had revealed a path, and I was determined to follow it, no matter where it led. The forest had secrets to share, and I was ready to uncover them, even if it meant facing the darkness within myself. The air shimmered around me as the last remnants of light settled, casting a soft glow across the clearing. I took a moment to steady my breath, my heart still racing from the confrontation. The forest felt alive now, pulsating with energy as if it had awakened to my resolve. But the peace was deceptive. A nagging feeling crept in, an unsettling sense that something was still lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. I looked around, scanning the trees, but there was only silence, punctuated by the rustling of leaves and the gentle breeze. I took a step forward, drawn toward the pedestal in the center of the clearing. The strange symbols carved into the stone glimmered faintly, reflecting the residual light. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cool surface, and a jolt of energy surged through me. Images flickered in my mind, visions of the forest in different states, vibrant and alive, yet also shadowed by an unseen dread. Suddenly, the air grew heavy again, and the whispers returned, this time clearer, more insistent. I could hear fragments of words, warnings laced with an urgency that sent shivers down my spine. Find the truth before it consumes you. The light is not what it seems. I stumbled back, heart racing. What did they mean? The light had drawn me in, promising understanding, yet now it felt like a mirage. A trap. I was on the verge of unraveling something far beyond my comprehension. Determined to resist the fear clawing at my insides, I pressed my palms against the pedestal. What is the truth? I demanded, my voice trembling but resolute. What do you want from me? The symbols began to glow brighter, illuminating the clearing in a kaleidoscope of colors. The whispers intensified, swirling around me in a tempest of sound. The light enveloped me once again, pulling me deeper into its embrace. Visions flooded my mind, memories that weren't my own. A young woman, her eyes filled with hope, stepping into the forest, her laughter echoing through the trees. A deep sadness followed, her silhouette fading as shadows enveloped her. I saw her struggle, battling against a force that sought to consume her light. Lila, I whispered, realizing I had witnessed a piece of her story, a fragment of someone who had been here before me. Then the scene shifted abruptly. I was now standing in a darkened void, the light flickering in the distance. Shadows danced around me, forming twisted figures that whispered my name. You will join us, they hissed, their voices dripping with malice. No! I shouted, fighting against the darkness. I won't become a part of you. The light surged forward, cutting through the shadows like a knife. I felt it reaching for me, inviting me back into its warmth. But I hesitated, fear gripping my heart. The visions I had seen were not merely memories, they were warnings. Lila had succumbed to the darkness, and I could feel its grasp tightening around me. In that moment, I realized I had to confront this fear head-on. I had to break the cycle. I closed my eyes, focusing on the light within me, the determination that had brought me to this forest in the first place. I would not let the darkness claim me. Leave me be. I shouted, channeling every ounce of strength into my voice. I choose my own path. With that declaration, the shadows recoiled, their forms dissipating like smoke in the wind. The light enveloped me, fierce and radiant, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. I felt a surge of energy coursing through my veins, igniting a fire within me that blazed against the shadows. The clearing erupted in brightness, the symbols on the pedestal glowing with an intensity that was almost blinding. I could feel the weight of the forest shift, the trees standing taller, their branches swaying in rhythm with my heartbeat. I was not merely a visitor anymore, I was a part of this place, connected to its magic and its history. As the light surged, the whispers transformed into a single, harmonious voice. You have chosen, and in that choice lies your power. The light and darkness are intertwined, and only by understanding both can you uncover the truth. With those words, the light enveloped me completely, and the visions surged forth once more, faster now, clearer. I saw fragments of Lila's journey intertwined with my own, her struggles mirroring my fears, her choices echoing in the decisions I faced. I saw the potential for both light and shadow within myself, the balance that must be struck to forge ahead. Then, the visions coalesced into a single moment, the moment of truth. I stood at a crossroad, one path illuminated by the radiant light, the other shrouded in darkness. I felt the weight of the decision pressing on my shoulders, the understanding that the journey was mine alone. With a newfound clarity, I opened my eyes. The clearing had transformed, filled with warmth and light, yet the shadows lingered at its edges, a reminder of the balance that existed. I was alive, free to explore this strange and wondrous place, but also aware of the darkness that could easily ensnare me if I let my guard down. I turned back to the pedestal, feeling a sense of purpose swelling within me. I will uncover the truth, I vowed aloud. I will learn from both the light and the darkness. And as I spoke those words, the forest shifted around me, the trees parting to reveal a new path, one that beckoned me forward. I stepped into the light, ready to embrace the journey ahead, knowing that understanding lay at the end of my quest. Little did I know that the shadows would follow, testing my resolve and revealing the depths of my own fears as I ventured deeper into the heart of the forest. The light may guide me, but the darkness would challenge me, reminding me that the path to truth is never straightforward, but fraught with trials that would shape my very soul. As I ventured deeper into the newly revealed path, the air around me began to shift again, charged with an electric anticipation. The trees stood like ancient guardians, their branches swaying gently, as if whispering secrets only they knew. I could still feel the warmth of the light behind me, a comforting presence, but I also sensed the lurking shadows, ever watchful and patient. With each step I took, the vibrant energy of the forest pulsed around me, infusing me with a sense of purpose. Yet, a part of me remained apprehensive, aware that the darkness was not far behind. I pressed on, determined to confront whatever trials awaited. The path twisted and turned, leading me to a clearing filled with an otherworldly mist that swirled around my ankles. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the chill of uncertainty, but the desire for understanding pushed me forward. As I entered the clearing, the mist thickened, wrapping around me like a veil. In the center stood a large stone archway, etched with the same mysterious symbols I had seen before. The air buzzed with an energy that made my skin tingle. I stepped closer, curiosity overtaking my caution. The moment I crossed beneath the arch, the mist evaporated, revealing a new landscape that was both breathtaking and terrifying. Before me lay a vast expanse, a twilight realm suspended between night and day. The sky shimmered with colors I had never seen, deep purples and vibrant blues blending into a surreal horizon. But even in this beauty, I felt an underlying sense of dread. The ground beneath my feet was uneven, a mosaic of stones that felt alive, shifting with each step I took. Suddenly, I heard laughter, a lilting sound that echoed through the air, mingling with the whispers of the forest. I turned, searching for its source. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman with flowing hair that cascaded like a waterfall of silver. Her eyes sparkled with mischief and wisdom, and her presence radiated a sense of otherworldly charm. "Welcome, seeker," she said, her voice melodic yet carrying an edge of challenge. "I am Alara, the keeper of truths in this realm. To move forward, you must face the trials that test your spirit." "Trials?" I echoed, the weight of her words settling heavily on me. "What kind of trials?" Alara smiled, a glimmer of amusement dancing in her eyes. "The trials of the heart and mind. They will reveal your innermost fears, the shadows that haunt you. Only by facing them can you unlock the true power of the light within. My heart raced as I realized the gravity of her statement. This was not just a test of strength, it was a journey into the depths of my own psyche. I had felt the pull of my fears, but to confront them openly was daunting. "Are you ready?" Elara asked, tilting her head slightly, studying me. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "I'm ready." "Then let the trials begin," she declared, and with a flick of her wrist, the ground beneath me transformed. The stones shifted, forming a pathway that led into the twilight. I stepped forward, the mist swirling around me once more. It thickened until I could barely see a foot in front of me. The laughter faded, replaced by a chilling silence. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat echoing in my ears. As I walked, shadows began to emerge from the mist, dark figures that flickered like candle flames. They danced around me, whispering in voices that were both familiar and foreign. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized them, my fears, my insecurities, my regrets. One shadow detached itself from the rest, taking on the form of a younger version of myself. She stood with downcast eyes, her shoulders hunched as if bearing the weight of the world. "You think you're brave now," she murmured, her voice heavy with sorrow. "But you abandoned me." I stumbled back, taken aback by her words. "No, I didn't abandon you. I've grown." The shadow laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the twilight. "Grown? You've run from the truth. From the pain. You hide behind this light, but you're still afraid." Panic rose within me. I could feel the shadows closing in, their whispers morphing into a cacophony of doubt. I had worked hard to move past my fears, to find strength, yet here they were, staring me in the face. "No!" I shouted, fighting against the tide of despair. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not that person anymore." But the shadows only intensified, morphing into memories, moments of failure, of loneliness, of rejection. I felt their weight pressing down on me, each memory a chain that threatened to drag me back into darkness. "You can't escape us," the shadows hissed, encircling me. "You're still haunted by the past." In that moment, clarity struck me. These fears were not my enemy. They were a part of me, pieces of my journey that had shaped who I was. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the light that flickered within. "You are part of my past," I said, my voice firm. "But you do not define me. I am stronger than my fears, and I will not be held captive by them any longer." With those words, I reached out, allowing the light within me to surge forward. It pierced through the darkness, illuminating the shadows that surrounded me. They hesitated, flickering like candle flames caught in a breeze, before dissipating into the mist. As the shadows faded, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The memories no longer felt like chains, they were lessons learned, reminders of my resilience. I had faced them, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my power. The mist began to lift, revealing Elara waiting at the edge of the clearing, a proud smile on her face. "You have passed the first trial," she declared, her voice ringing with approval. "But there are more to come. Are you ready to continue?" I nodded, a newfound determination coursing through me. "Yes, I'm ready." "Then let us move on," she said, gesturing to the pathway ahead, where the twilight shimmered with the promise of new challenges and discoveries. As I stepped forward, I felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of my fears. The trials had just begun, but I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, guided by the light within and the strength I had uncovered. I would not only confront the shadows, but also embrace the journey to uncover the truths hidden deep within the forest and within myself. The path before me shimmered with an ethereal glow as I walked beside Alara, my heart buoyed by the triumph over my fears. The twilight realm, once filled with shadows and uncertainty, now pulsed with a sense of possibility. I felt a connection to the light around me, and each step forward filled me with renewed confidence. Alara led me deeper into the forest, where the trees grew taller and more twisted, their branches interwoven like fingers grasping at the sky. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could sense that the next trial would be different, deeper, perhaps more personal. Your next challenge will test your resolve, Alara said, her voice steady. It will force you to confront not only what you fear, but what you desire most. Be prepared, desires can be both a light and a shadow. I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me. What did I truly desire? The thought lingered in my mind, raising questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. As we walked, the forest shifted again, revealing a clearing filled with shimmering pools of water. Each pool reflected a different scene, a tapestry of moments that seemed to dance before my eyes. I approached one, entranced by the images playing on its surface. In the water, I saw myself standing in front of a large audience, speaking passionately about my art. The crowd was enraptured, and I felt a rush of exhilaration. But as this scene unfolded, I saw the faces change, their expressions shifting from admiration to judgment. My heart sank as the weight of their disdain washed over me. The scene faded, replaced by another, a painting I had created, now torn and discarded, left to rot in a dark corner. Is this your desire? Alara asked, stepping beside me. To be seen and appreciated, yet always haunted by the fear of rejection? I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. I want to be an artist. I want my work to touch people, to make them feel something. But what if they hate it? What if they hate me? You are not defined by their perception, Alara reminded me gently. This is the challenge of the heart. Embrace your desire, but understand its weight. I took a deep breath, focusing on the pool again. This time, instead of shying away from the fear of judgment, I stepped closer, allowing the images to wash over me. I saw moments of joy, children smiling at my paintings, people connecting with my work in ways I had never imagined. Their laughter and appreciation swirled around me, filling the air with warmth. Yes, I whispered, feeling the excitement swell within. This is what I want. To create, to share my vision. But the shadows returned, swirling around the edges of the pool, their whispers creeping back into my mind. You're a failure, they taunted. You'll never be good enough. No! I cried out, my voice echoing through the clearing. I won't let you take this from me. Alara placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. Face it head on. Embrace both the light of your desire and the shadow of your fear. With renewed determination, I focused on the images in the pool, allowing the shadows to exist alongside the light. I understood that fear was a part of desire, and that both were intertwined. The path of an artist was filled with risk, and I had to accept that vulnerability if I wanted to truly create. As I accepted this duality, the pool began to shimmer and shift. The images solidified into a beautiful painting, vibrant and alive. I reached out, feeling a connection to my passion, and watched as the scene changed. I saw myself creating in a sunlit studio, colors swirling around me, each brushstroke filled with emotion and authenticity. This is who I am, I declared, my voice strong. I am not afraid to create, to share my heart with the world. The shadows hesitated, then began to dissolve, fading into the mist. The pools of water transformed into a sea of light, sparkling with the essence of my desires. Elara smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "You have faced the trial of the heart and emerged stronger," she said. "Now, one final trial remains. Are you prepared?" I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "I'm ready." With a wave of her hand, the sea of light parted, revealing a dark passageway that stretched into the depths of the forest. It loomed ominously before me, a stark contrast to the brilliance of the clearing. "Beyond this passage lies the essence of your journey," Elara explained. "You will confront not only your fears and desires, but the very truth of who you are. Remember, the light will always be with you." Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the darkness, the shadows wrapping around me like a cloak. The passage was narrow, and the air grew heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. But I held onto the light within, feeling its warmth guide me forward. As I ventured deeper, the shadows whispered again, their voices the dissonant symphony. "You cannot escape the past. You are forever tied to it." Images began to flicker before me, memories I had long buried. Moments of loss, of grief, of longing. I saw myself standing at the edge of a grave, tears streaming down my face, mourning not only the loss of a loved one but the pieces of myself that had been lost in that moment. "No," I gasped, stepping back. "I can't bear this." But Elara's voice echoed in my mind. "Face it, understand it. Only then can you find freedom." With trembling resolve, I stepped closer to the scene, allowing the emotions to wash over me. I felt the grief, the pain, but also the love that had existed alongside it. In that moment, I realized that loss was not solely an ending, it was a part of life, an integral thread woven into the fabric of my existence. "I remember you," I whispered, addressing the memory. "I remember the joy you brought me. I honor your memory, but I will not be held captive by grief." As I spoke those words, the darkness began to shift, and the memories transformed into a tapestry of colors, blending together. I saw the moments of joy, laughter, and connection that followed the loss, the love that had filled the void, the lessons learned, the strength gained. The shadows receded, revealing a pathway bathed in light. I emerged from the passageway, heart racing but filled with a sense of peace. The trials had been daunting, but I had faced them all, uncovering the truth of who I was and what I truly desired. Elara stood before me, a knowing smile on her lips. "You have faced the trials and emerged transformed. The light within you is stronger than the shadows that seek to dim it. Carry this truth forward and embrace the journey that lies ahead." I nodded, feeling the weight of the past lift as the warmth of the light surrounded me. I was ready to step into my future, armed with the understanding that both light and darkness would always be a part of my journey. As I turned to explore the new path before me, I felt a surge of hope. I was not just a seeker anymore, I was an artist, a survivor, a person embracing both the light and the shadows. The forest awaited, and I was ready to uncover its mysteries, knowing that my journey was only just beginning. It started with a simple question: how well do we really know the people around us? I was on my usual morning commute, the dim, flickering lights of the subway casting a muted glow over the faces of fellow passengers. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and stale coffee. I had my headphones in, but the music faded as I caught sight of someone. A man sat across from me, his gaze locked onto mine. At first, I thought nothing of it. Perhaps he was just lost in thought, or maybe he recognized me from somewhere. But then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It sent a shiver down my spine. I averted my eyes, trying to focus on the scrolling advertisements above, each bright image promising escape and excitement. Yet, his stare remained. As the train jerked to a stop, I glanced back at him. The man hadn't moved an inch. The crowd poured out, but he stayed seated, his eyes never leaving me. There was something unnerving about his expression, like he knew me, yet I could not place him. The doors slid shut, and we were alone again. I shifted in my seat, an uncomfortable knot tightening in my stomach. The lights flickered once more, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shadow behind him. I blinked, and it was gone. Just the dim glow of the train and the constant hum of the tracks. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling. I tried to forget it, to drown it in the mundane rituals of daily life, but sleep eluded me. When I finally drifted off, the man was there, lurking at the edges of my dreams. His face, though familiar, was clouded in shadows, shifting and changing. I couldn't scream. I couldn't run. I was paralyzed, trapped in a dream that felt all too real. In the days that followed, I began to see him everywhere. His face would flash in the windows of passing cars, in reflections on glass doors. It haunted me, each glimpse deeper than the last. I tried to dismiss it, but my mind raced with questions. Who was he? Why did he look so familiar? As time went on, the man transformed from an unsettling stranger to a terrifying specter. I would catch myself staring into mirrors, half expecting him to appear beside me, his smile wide and predatory. I became obsessed with trying to remember. Every memory from my past felt like a clue, every encounter a potential answer. Then one evening, while walking home, the air grew heavy and still. The streetlights flickered as I turned the corner, and my heart raced. I heard it then, a faint rustling behind me. I stopped, my breath caught in my throat. The sound was unmistakable. Footsteps. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the man. Instead, I was met with darkness. The street behind me lay empty, but the feeling of being watched clawed at my insides. I quickened my pace, the echo of my footsteps reverberating in the stillness. I couldn't shake the dread creeping up my spine. It was then that I realized this was no ordinary fear. It was as if something more sinister lurked just beyond my perception. I couldn't tell if I was losing my grip on reality or if I was being drawn into something far darker than I could comprehend. The whispers began soon after. Soft, barely audible at first, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. But they grew louder, more insistent, urging me to remember, to confront the figure that haunted my thoughts. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, my heart racing. I wanted to see him, to understand this connection, this feeling that had invaded my life. But as I peered deeper into my own reflection, the familiar contours of my face warped, and for a moment, I was sure I saw his features merging with mine. I stepped back, gasping. The room spun, and panic gripped me. Was it possible? Could I really be connected to this stranger? I had to know. I had to confront whatever dark truth lay ahead. Little did I know, the path I was about to take would lead me into the depths of my own forgotten memories, unearthing a past that should have remained buried. As I turned to leave, a chill swept through the air, and I heard it again, a whisper, closer this time, sending waves of dread through my body. Remember me, it breathed. And just like that, I knew my life would never be the same. The following day, the atmosphere felt heavier, like a storm brewing just out of sight. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, that I was teetering on the edge of an unseen precipice. As I stepped into the subway, I was greeted by the same flickering lights and the familiar hum of voices. But today, there was an urgency in the air that made my skin prickle. I scanned the crowded train, searching for that haunting face, but he was nowhere to be seen. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The nagging sense of dread settled back in, whispering that he was still there, lurking just beyond the edges of my perception. The ride felt interminable. I watched the world rush by through the grimy windows, each station blurring into the next. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more frantic than the last. I had to understand why he was haunting me, why his face was so familiar. During my lunch break, I decided to visit a local cafe that had always provided comfort. I ordered my usual, a cup of black coffee and a croissant, and settled into a corner booth, trying to find solace in the mundane. The cafe was warm, filled with the comforting sounds of clinking cups and soft chatter, but I felt anything but safe. As I sipped my coffee, my gaze wandered around the room, landing on a table in the far corner. A couple was deep in conversation, and I couldn't help but notice the woman. Her face was strikingly similar to the man's. A wave of nausea washed over me as recognition flickered at the back of my mind. Could they be related? I dismissed the thought. It was absurd. Yet the connection felt undeniable. I took a deep breath and, before I knew it, my feet were moving, carrying me closer to them. "Excuse me," I interrupted, my voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't help but notice. You look a lot like someone I saw recently." The couple turned to me, the woman raising an eyebrow, while the man glanced at her with curiosity. "Who do you mean?" he asked, his tone polite but cautious. I hesitated, unsure how to articulate my feelings. "A man. He was staring at me on the subway." He looked like you," I stammered. The woman exchanged a glance with the man, her expression shifting to one of concern. "We don't know anyone who fits that description," she said slowly. "But if he looked like me, perhaps it's just a coincidence." "Right," I murmured, feeling foolish. "I'm sorry to bother you." I turned to leave, but something stopped me. "Wait, is there any chance you know someone named Marcus? Or do you have any siblings?" The woman's expression shifted again, this time a shadow passing over her features. "Yes, I have a brother named Marcus." "Why do you ask?" A chill raced down my spine. "He's the man I saw," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the cafe noise. "The one who kept looking at me." The couple exchanged another glance, and the woman's brow furrowed in thought. "What did he look like?" she asked. I described him as best as I could, the dark hair, the unsettling smile, the way he seemed to see right through me. The woman's face paled, and the man leaned in closer, his voice low. "He hasn't been the same since the accident." "Accident?" I echoed, my heart pounding. "Marcus was involved in something terrible a few months ago. He's been distant, almost not himself. We thought he was just processing it." Processing. The word lingered in the air, heavy with implication. I felt my pulse quicken. "What happened?" The woman hesitated, and I could see the pain etched in her eyes. "He lost someone. A friend." It shook him to the core. Ever since, he's been fixated on something. We don't know what. My breath caught in my throat. I thought of the shadowy face, the haunting smiles in my dreams. I think he's trying to reach me, I confessed, the weight of my revelation sinking in. But I don't know why. The man reached for his partner's hand, squeezing it tightly. You shouldn't be involved with him. He's not himself. Please, just stay away. But how could I? A connection pulsed between us, an invisible thread tying my fate to that of a man I had never truly known. As I left the cafe, the cool air hit me like a wave. The weight of the woman's words echoed in my mind. I needed answers, but what if those answers led me to something darker than I could fathom? That night, I lay awake, the room cloaked in shadows. I replayed the conversation over and over, each word carving deeper into my consciousness. It was clear, I was on the brink of a revelation, but at what cost? I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling me under, but sleep was elusive. As I drifted, I felt the familiar presence creeping back into my dreams. This time, I was determined to confront him. I would unearth the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. Suddenly, I jolted awake, a scream caught in my throat. The room felt colder, and the shadows shifted unnaturally, twisting into shapes that seemed to pulse with life. I could hear it again, the whispers, growing louder, more insistent. Remember me. I shot up, my heart racing. This time, I wasn't alone. I could sense him, the figure lurking just out of view. I needed to face him, but what if the truth was more horrifying than I could bear? With every beat of my heart, the connection grew stronger. And as the shadows closed in around me, I knew there was no turning back. The following day felt like a descent into a waking nightmare. I walked the streets with a sense of dread hanging over me, each step heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. The man's face, Marcus, lingered in my thoughts like an unwanted shadow, tugging at the edges of my consciousness. I found myself back at the subway station, the familiar environment now a trap. The flickering lights overhead felt like an omen, and the clatter of trains echoed ominously, each sound twisting into something sinister. I felt as if I were being pulled deeper into a web, one I had stumbled into without fully understanding the consequences. As I descended the stairs, a sense of inevitability washed over me. I could almost hear the whispers, coaxing me forward. Remember me. It felt like a summons, an invitation to unravel the mystery that had entwined our lives. The train pulled in, and I boarded, scanning the carriage for any sign of him. My heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Would I see Marcus again? Would he finally reveal the connection that haunted me? Halfway through the ride, I noticed a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure stood at the far end of the carriage, cloaked in shadows, watching. I caught my breath. It was him. The familiar face that had invaded my dreams and thoughts. As the train jolted, I turned to look directly at him. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in the air was palpable. He didn't smile this time. Instead, he seemed lost in thought, as if caught in a moment just beyond reach. Marcus. I called out, my voice trembling with a mix of urgency and fear. He turned, and for a moment, our eyes locked. I felt a pull, an inexplicable connection that both terrified and intrigued me. He took a step forward, his gaze piercing through the crowd as if searching for something or someone. Who are you? He asked, his voice low and rough, as if he hadn't used it in days. Why do you keep looking at me? I don't know, I replied, my heart racing. I've been seeing you everywhere. You were on the subway, and then I. He interrupted, his expression shifting to one of pain. You shouldn't be here. You don't understand. The train screeched to a halt and the door slid open. He hesitated, glancing back at me. "You need to stay away from me. I'm not the person you think I am." But the words spilled out before I could stop myself. "No. I need to understand. I think I'm connected to you somehow. Please, just tell me the truth." The moment hung in the air, charged with unspoken fears. But before he could respond, the train lurched forward again, and I felt the world around us start to shift. I reached out, desperate to grasp hold of the moment, but he stepped back, a shadow slipping into the crowd. I felt panic rising within me. I couldn't lose him again. I pushed through the throng of passengers, my heart pounding as I called his name. "Marcus. Wait." I burst onto the platform just as he stepped out of view. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The station was emptying out, but I was determined to find him. I followed the sound of hurried footsteps, my pulse racing with every beat. Suddenly, I spotted him at the far end of the corridor, staring intently at something. I approached cautiously, my breath quickening. "Marcus." He turned, and the expression on his face sent chills down my spine. It was a mix of anger and despair. "Why can't you just leave me alone?" he shouted, his voice echoing against the tiled walls. "Because I can't," I exclaimed, feeling the tears prick at my eyes. "I don't even know why. I keep seeing your face, and it feels like you're trying to tell me something." "Stop," he shouted, his hands trembling. "You don't know what you're asking for." But I pressed on. "Then help me. Tell me what happened. Please." His expression shifted, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the flicker of vulnerability behind his hardened facade. "You really want to know?" he whispered, his voice low. "You might wish you hadn't." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I nodded, my resolve firm. "Yes. I need to know." He hesitated, glancing around as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "Meet me tonight," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "At the old factory by the river. It's where everything started." Before I could respond, he turned and vanished into the crowd, leaving me standing there, heart racing. The weight of his words settled over me, mixing dread with curiosity. I knew I had to go. There was no escaping this. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I made my way to the factory. The air was thick with fog, and the path was dimly lit by flickering streetlights. My heart pounded in my chest, each step echoing my uncertainty. The factory loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against the darkening sky. I felt a strange sense of foreboding wash over me as I approached. This place, abandoned and decaying, seemed to pulse with secrets. As I stepped inside, the air grew cold, and the smell of rust and mildew enveloped me. I called out for Marcus, my voice echoing against the walls. "Marcus." "I'm here." Silence answered, and the shadows danced around me, twisting into shapes that felt alive. The whispers returned, softer now, but no less insistent. "Remember me?" I took a deep breath, fighting back the fear that clawed at my insides. I could do this. I had to know what had bound us together. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me. My heart leaped in my chest as I turned. There he was, Marcus, stepping out of the shadows, his face drawn and weary. "You came," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," I replied, though the tremor in my voice betrayed my fear. I need to understand. He looked around, as if expecting someone else to appear. You shouldn't have come here, he said, the weight of his words pressing down on me. This place, it holds memories I can't escape. It's where everything changed. What happened? I pressed, stepping closer. Tell me. He took a deep breath, and the shadows seemed to thicken around us. It was a group of us, friends, like family. We were exploring this factory one night, and things went horribly wrong. An accident happened. Someone died. My heart sank, a pit of despair opening within me. And you blame yourself? His gaze fell to the ground, and he nodded slowly. Ever since that night, I've felt lost. Like a part of me is missing. I've been trying to reach out, but I didn't know how. Reach out? To me? I asked, bewildered. Because I think you were there that night, he confessed, his eyes searching mine for understanding. You were the friend I lost. The word struck me like a blow, and I staggered back, breathless. Memories flooded my mind, fragments of a past I couldn't fully grasp. No, it can't be, I whispered. It's the only explanation, he urged, desperation lacing his voice. I've been haunted by your face, just as you've been haunted by mine. We were connected, and now... A sudden sound interrupted him, the unmistakable clatter of footsteps echoing in the dark. Panic gripped me. We have to go, I said urgently. But Marcus was frozen, staring into the darkness beyond us. No, he breathed, his expression shifting to one of horror. They've found us. Before I could respond, the shadows closed in around us, and a figure emerged, a silhouette of a man, cold and ominous. You shouldn't have come back, Marcus, the voice echoed, deep and menacing. The air thickened with tension, and I felt the ground beneath me shift. I knew, without a doubt, that the night was about to spiral into something far more dangerous than either of us could handle. Run! Marcus shouted, and we turned to flee, the specter of our past chasing us through the darkness. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I sprinted alongside Marcus, the sound of our hurried footsteps echoing against the cold, metallic walls of the factory. I glanced back, half expecting to see the shadowy figure gaining on us, but the darkness swallowed everything behind us, leaving only the oppressive silence in our racing hearts. Where do we go? I gasped, desperation clawing at my throat. The factory felt like a maze, its twisted corridors and decaying machinery morphing into a labyrinth of memories and fears. We need to get to the exit, Marcus shouted, urgency etched in his features. If we can make it outside, we'll have a chance. I nodded, my breath coming in quick bursts. But as we rounded a corner, I skidded to a halt. The way ahead was blocked. Rusting machinery loomed like forgotten giants, a tangled mass of metal that created a dead end. Panic surged within me. Back, Marcus urged, his eyes wide with fear. We turned, retracing our steps, but as we rushed back, I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the shadows, closer now, almost stalking us. Why are they after us? I gasped, glancing at him. What did we do? Marcus's face paled. It's not us they want. It's me. They think I know something I buried deep within myself after that night. What night? I pressed, but before he could answer, the figure emerged from the shadows again, more defined now, a tall man cloaked in darkness, his eyes glinting like cold steel. Marcus, the figure called, his voice low and menacing. You can't escape your past. It's time to face the truth. Who are you? I shouted, stepping in front of Marcus instinctively. What do you want from him? The figure smirked, his gaze shifting to me. You're the one who needs to understand. You're tangled in this mess too. My heart raced, confusion mixing with fear. What do you mean? I don't even know what happened. The man stepped closer, the shadows clinging to him like a shroud. You were part of something you can't remember. But trust me, it'll come back. It always does. Without warning, he lunged at us, and Marcus grabbed my hand. We dashed down a narrow passage, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The factory was alive, creaking and groaning around us, the very walls closing in as if it wanted to keep our secrets hidden. We need to get out. I cried, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I had been part of this tragedy? What did that mean? Just keep running, Marcus shouted, pulling me through the darkness. The sounds of pursuit faded slightly, but I could still feel the oppressive weight of the figure behind us, like a shadow we couldn't escape. We burst into a large open area, an abandoned assembly line lined with broken machinery. Dust floated in the air, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight streaming through a shattered window. Look for a way out, Marcus urged, scanning the area. There has to be another exit. I glanced around frantically, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced with questions. What happened to us? Why couldn't I remember? But there was no time to dwell on it. As I searched, a low growl emanated from the darkness behind us, sending chills racing down my spine. The figure was closer, and with it, the air grew colder. Over here, Marcus shouted, pointing toward a rusted door at the far end of the room. We sprinted toward it, my pulse racing. But just as we reached for the handle, the figure stepped into the light, blocking our escape. Do you really think you can run from the truth? He taunted, his voice dripping with malice. Get away from us, I shouted, my voice trembling but defiant. Marcus stepped in front of me, a protective instinct igniting within him. You don't have to do this. We can work together to find the truth. The figure laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. You think you can bargain with me? Your past is not so easily forgotten. In that moment, I felt it, an electric charge in the air, a pulse of energy that seemed to resonate with my very being. Marcus, we have to, I started, but before I could finish, the shadows around the figure began to shift, swirling and coiling like smoke. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted, momentarily illuminating the space around us. I shielded my eyes, and when I opened them, the figure was gone, but the air crackled with tension. What just happened? I asked, bewildered. Marcus turned to me, a mix of awe and fear etched on his face. I don't know, but we can't stay here. We need to get out now. We threw open the door, stumbling into a narrow corridor that felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the oppressive atmosphere of the factory. We raced down the hallway, the echoes of our footsteps mingling with the fading whispers. Just as we reached the end, we burst outside, the cool night air hitting us like a wave of relief. The factory loomed behind us, dark and foreboding, but we were free. For now. We paused, both of us gasping for breath, the adrenaline slowly fading. I turned to Marcus, my heart pounding. What was that back there? What happened? He looked at me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. I think we tapped into something, a part of the past that was buried. Maybe we're connected in ways we don't fully understand. As I caught my breath, I glanced back at the factory, an unease settling in my chest. But that man, he knew something. He said I was part of it too. Marcus's expression darkened. He's right. We have to dig deeper. We need to uncover the truth, even if it's painful. There are secrets here that could change everything. I nodded, fear and determination swirling within me. So what do we do now? First, we find a safe place to talk. I have some leads, things I've been too afraid to explore. He paused, a distant look in his eyes. Then we dive into our memories, together. Together. The word resonated between us, a fragile promise binding our fates. I knew we were on the brink of uncovering something profound, but as we moved away from the factory, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch around us, whispering secrets I was not yet ready to hear. And in the distance, I thought I heard a voice echoing in the night, familiar yet haunting. Remember me. But this time, I was ready to confront the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. We walked in silence, the night air thick with tension. Each footstep felt heavy, laden with the weight of unspoken fears. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that danced around us, almost as if they were alive. Marcus led the way to a small diner that was still open, its neon sign buzzing quietly. As we entered, the familiar scent of coffee and grease enveloped us, providing a momentary sense of normalcy. We slid into a booth at the back, the worn vinyl seats creaking under our weight. "I'll grab us some coffee," Marcus said, glancing around as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. I nodded, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. As he walked to the counter, I took a moment to breathe. The diner was a world away from the factory, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still trapped in its grip. My thoughts drifted back to the figure, the way he had taunted us, how he seemed to know more than he let on. When Marcus returned with 2 steaming cups, his expression was serious. "I've been doing some digging," he said, setting 1 cup in front of me. "About that night at the factory. Did you find anything?" I asked, my heart pounding with anticipation. He hesitated, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. "There were reports, accidents, disappearances. Some people went missing around the same time. I think we might have been part of a group that was exploring the factory when it all happened." "Missing?" My voice trembled. "You mean people never came back?" "Exactly," he replied, his eyes darkening. "It was swept under the rug, buried by the company. They didn't want any scandal. But there are whispers, stories that people told after it happened." "What kind of stories?" I pressed, leaning in closer. "Rumors of something sinister, an experiment gone wrong. They were working on something in secret, something dangerous. That's why we need to remember. If we can uncover what really happened, we might find the answers we're looking for." My mind raced. And what if it's worse than we think? What if we uncover something that puts us in danger? Marcus met my gaze, determination etched on his face. "We can't live in fear. The truth is out there, and it's haunting us. If we don't confront it, it will consume us." I nodded slowly, my resolve hardening. "Okay. Let's find out what really happened." As we spoke, I felt a strange connection to him, a bond forged in the darkness we both faced. The diner felt like a haven, but outside, I could sense the shadows lurking just beyond the glass, waiting for us to leave. After we finished our coffee, Marcus suggested we head to the library. There might be records, old newspaper articles, something that can shed light on the events surrounding the factory. The library was closed, but Marcus had an idea. We can use the back entrance. I used to sneak in after hours to study. A surge of excitement mixed with fear coursed through me as we made our way to the back of the building. The cool night air prickled my skin, and the darkness felt alive, a silent witness to our quest for truth. Inside, the library was dimly lit, the only sound the distant ticking of a clock. We navigated through the stacks of books, the musty smell of paper filling the air. Marcus led me to a section filled with local history and newspapers. "Here," he said, pulling out a dusty old binder. "Let's see what we can find." As we flipped through the brittle pages, the stories began to unfold, a series of accidents at the factory, unexplained phenomena, and the people who had vanished. I felt my heart race with each article. There were names I recognized, faces that seemed vaguely familiar. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to a photograph. This was taken right before the incident. "Do you see anyone you recognize?" I leaned closer, my heart pounding. The photo showed a group of young people, all smiles and laughter, standing in front of the factory. I searched the faces, and then my breath caught in my throat. "There!" I exclaimed, pointing to a girl with dark hair and bright eyes. "That's me." Marcus's eyes widened. "What? Are you sure?" I nodded, disbelief mingling with recognition. I remember this day. We were there to explore, but my voice trailed off, a fog creeping into my memories. "Something went wrong," Marcus murmured, a grim realization settling over us. "That's why we're connected. We were all there that night." As I continued to look through the binder, I stumbled upon a newspaper clipping that made my heart drop. It read, "Factory accident claims lives, several missing." The article detailed the chaos that followed the incident, the frantic search, and the desperate families left behind. "Look at the date," Marcus said, pointing to the corner. It was the same night we explored. "Why can't I remember?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why is it all a blur?" "It could be a defense mechanism," he suggested. "Our minds might have tried to protect us from the trauma." Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The shadows in the library seemed to thicken, and an uneasy feeling washed over me. "We should get out of here," I said, glancing nervously around the dimly lit space. As we gathered the articles, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure loomed in the darkness, watching us with a predatory gaze. My heart raced, fear clenching in my throat. "Marcus, we need to go," I hissed, my voice urgent. He nodded, his expression tense. "Let's move." We slipped out of the library's back entrance, the cool air hitting us like a wave. But as we stepped into the night, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The shadows were no longer just shadows, they were watching us, waiting for the moment to strike. "We need to find a safe place to talk," Marcus said, glancing back at the library. "What if they're following us?" I whispered, the thought sending a chill down my spine. "They won't stop until they get what they want. We need to figure out what we know, and soon." We walked quickly down the street, the oppressive feeling of being watched pressing down on us. I couldn't shake the sensation that the figure from the factory was still lurking in the darkness, a silent sentinel waiting for the right moment to pounce. As we turned a corner, we spotted a small park. The shadows from the trees stretched out like arms, inviting yet foreboding. "Let's sit there," Marcus suggested, leading the way. Once we settled on a bench, I looked at him, my mind racing. What do we do now? We can't let them silence us. We dig deeper, he replied, determination shining in his eyes. We need to find out who else was involved, who might know the truth about that night. And we need to do it fast. Just as he spoke, a rustling sound nearby caught my attention. I turned to see a shadow darting behind a tree. Did you see that? I whispered, my heart pounding. Marcus's expression hardened. We're not alone. Before I could respond, a voice called out from the darkness, sending a shiver down my spine. You shouldn't have come back. The familiar voice echoed ominously, and from the shadows stepped the figure, the man from the factory, his eyes glinting with a chilling intensity. Your curiosity will cost you dearly, he said, advancing toward us. You've awakened forces that should have remained buried. I felt Marcus tense beside me, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The night was thick with tension, and as the figure stepped closer, I realized that the truth we sought was entwined with a darkness we could no longer ignore. In that moment, I knew we were in deeper than we had ever imagined. And there was no turning back. Have you ever heard a sound in the dead of night that made your heart race and your skin crawl? That unsettling feeling when something is just out of sight, lurking in the shadows? For me, it started one ordinary evening. I had just settled into my apartment after a long day, feeling the familiar comfort of home wrap around me like a blanket. Little did I know that comfort was about to shatter. As the clock struck midnight, I lay in bed, half asleep, when I first heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible sound, like the gentle brush of footsteps on carpet. At first, I brushed it off as the settling of the building or the creaking of pipes. But as the nights passed, the sounds grew louder, more distinct. Each night, they became a haunting rhythm that echoed through my mind, a reminder that I was not alone. I checked every room in my apartment, my tiny kitchen, the cramped bathroom, even the storage closet filled with forgotten trinkets and old boxes. Nothing. Just silence, punctuated by my racing heartbeat and the low hum of the refrigerator. But the sound persisted, and soon it wasn't just footsteps. I began to hear whispers, hushed tones that slithered through the air, chilling my bones. Is someone there? I would call out, my voice trembling, but the only response was the eerie echo of my own words. One night, I decided enough was enough. I would stay awake and confront whatever was causing these disturbances. I brewed a cup of strong coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air as I settled onto the couch, eyes scanning every corner of the dimly lit room. The walls, once familiar and comforting, now felt like they were closing in, filled with secrets I could not uncover. Minutes turned to hours, and as the clock ticked closer to 3 a.m., the atmosphere in the apartment shifted. The silence grew thick, almost palpable, wrapping around me like a fog. Then, just as I thought the night would end without incident, I saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. I turned my head, heart pounding, and froze. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, glided across the wall. My breath caught in my throat as I blinked, willing myself to believe it was a trick of the light. But no, there it was again, a figure, elongated and indistinct, slipping through the room like a wisp of smoke. What do you want? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. The shadow paused, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a shape, a face. But it was gone before I could comprehend it, retreating into the void, leaving behind a cold emptiness that settled deep within my chest. Panic surged through me, and I leapt up from the couch, my legs trembling as I approached the wall where the figure had passed. I pressed my hand against the cool surface, searching for any sign of life, any clue that could explain what I had just witnessed. My fingers brushed against the wallpaper, the texture rough and familiar, but the sensation did nothing to calm my racing heart. Then, I heard it again, soft, deliberate footsteps creeping closer. They were no longer just echoes of the night, they were real, and they were here. I turned and ran toward the front door, ready to escape the confines of my own home. But as I reached for the doorknob, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if it wasn't just a figment of my imagination? What if something truly lived within these walls? I hesitated, torn between fleeing into the night and confronting the unknown. The sounds grew louder, reverberating in my ears. They were insistent, almost demanding. I could feel the air growing heavier, as if the very atmosphere was charged with energy. Gathering every ounce of courage, I turned around to face the darkness that loomed behind me. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice echoing through the silence, strong and defiant. But there was no reply, only the weight of the silence pressing in. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a drumbeat that seemed to echo through the room. The shadows shifted, and I squinted into the dim light, searching for any sign of movement. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, followed by the unmistakable sound of something dragging across the floor. My breath caught, and instinct kicked in. I raced down the hallway, my feet barely touching the ground as I sprinted toward the kitchen. What awaited me there was a scene I couldn't comprehend. The chairs were overturned, the tablecloth was askew, and the faint glow of the streetlight outside illuminated something that made my skin crawl, a dark, indistinct shape crouched in the corner. I took a hesitant step back, heart racing. "Who are you?" I stammered, trying to sound braver than I felt. The shape shifted slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw the outline of a face staring back at me. It was hauntingly familiar, yet I could not place it. Panic flooded my veins as I fought the urge to flee. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving me alone in the dim kitchen, surrounded by chaos and confusion. The only sound was the rapid beating of my heart, echoing in the stillness, reminding me that I was very much alive. The fear settled over me like a shroud, wrapping around my thoughts and smothering them. I stood there, frozen, wondering what I had just witnessed. I wanted to believe it was just a trick of my mind, the product of sleepless nights and paranoia. But deep down, I knew better. Something was in my apartment, something that thrived in the darkness, and it was watching me. As I backed away, I knew one thing for certain: I could no longer ignore the night sounds that had become my unwelcome companions. The shadows were calling, and I was about to answer. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through my window felt both comforting and deceptive. I wanted to believe that the night's events had been a figment of my imagination, a product of fatigue and stress. But as I sipped my coffee, the unease lingered, a reminder that something had crossed the threshold of my home. Determined to reclaim my life, I decided to research the apartment building. I needed answers. Surely, there had to be some explanation for the disturbances that haunted my nights. I grabbed my laptop and settled at the small dining table, the clatter of keys filling the silence as I searched for any history related to my home. As I scrolled through articles and forums, I stumbled upon an online community dedicated to urban legends and hauntings in the city. There, I found a post that sent chills down my spine. A resident from my building had written about strange occurrences, particularly in the apartment I now occupied. 10 years ago, the post read, a woman named Evelyn lived in the third-floor unit. She was known for her eccentric behavior, often speaking to shadows and claiming to hear voices. One night, she vanished without a trace. No one ever saw her again. I sat back, my heart pounding. Was it possible that her spirit lingered in this very space? It felt ridiculous, yet the evidence of the previous night's events weighed heavily on my mind. Determined to dig deeper, I continued searching for more information about Evelyn. I discovered that her disappearance had never been solved. A cold case, buried by time and overshadowed by more sensational stories. My hands trembled slightly as I read through the comments, many sharing similar tales of unease and unexplained noises. "She's still here," one comment warned. "If you hear her, you need to leave." Leave? The thought sent a wave of dread through me. I couldn't simply abandon my home, my life. I had to confront this. Later that evening, I prepared myself for another long night. I set up my phone to record audio, hoping to capture any sounds that might explain the disturbances. I also made sure to keep a flashlight by my side. The shadows held secrets, and I was determined to uncover them. As darkness fell, I sank into the couch, the familiar creaks of the old building echoing around me. The atmosphere felt charged, alive with anticipation. I closed my eyes, allowing the night to envelop me. The sounds of the city faded away, replaced by the rhythmic ticking of the clock. It wasn't long before I heard them again, soft, hesitant footsteps creeping through the apartment. I flipped on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark, revealing nothing but shadows and furniture. My heart raced, the fear creeping back into my mind. "Show yourself!" I shouted again, my voice echoing in the silence. The footsteps paused, then resumed, this time coming from the hallway. I steadied my breath and stood up, moving cautiously toward the sound. Each step felt heavy, as if the floor itself was urging me to turn back. As I reached the hallway, the air grew colder, and I could see my breath forming misty clouds. The flashlight flickered slightly, and I tightened my grip on it, determined not to show fear. Then, I saw it. The shadow darted just beyond the threshold of my bedroom, a dark figure slipping away from the light. I followed it, adrenaline surging through my veins. My mind raced with questions. Was this Evelyn? Or was it something more sinister? I stepped into the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The flashlight illuminated the space, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. But the figure was gone, leaving only an unsettling silence. Just as I turned to leave, I noticed something on the floor. A small, old photograph, partially hidden beneath the bed. I picked it up, my hands trembling as I examined it. It was a faded picture of a woman, her face strikingly similar to the shadow I had seen. I felt a chill run down my spine. Evelyn, the woman who had vanished. The room seemed to close in around me as I examined the photograph. Was she trying to communicate? Or was this a warning to stay away? The air was thick with uncertainty, and I could almost hear the whispers again, low and insistent. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang from the kitchen, like something had fallen. The noise jolted me from my thoughts, and instinctively, I ran back toward the sound. As I reached the doorway, I was met with an eerie sight. The kitchen chairs were once again overturned, the tablecloth was bunched up as if someone had pulled it. "Who's doing this?" I yelled, my voice rising in panic. But the room was silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator and my own ragged breath. I felt as though I was teetering on the edge of reality, caught between fear and disbelief. As I bent to pick up one of the chairs, I noticed something on the table, a small, handwritten note. My fingers brushed against the paper, and I unfolded it slowly. The words scrawled across it sent a jolt of fear through me. Help me. My heart raced as I glanced around the kitchen, the shadows pooling in the corners, dark and threatening. I took a step back, overwhelmed by the implications. Was Evelyn reaching out? Or was there something else at play here? The shadows seemed to swell, growing thicker as if they were alive, waiting for me to make a move. I backed away, my instincts screaming at me to flee. But I couldn't leave. I needed answers. Suddenly, the air shifted, and I felt a cold breeze wash over me. I turned, and in that moment, I saw her. The figure of a woman, translucent and flickering like a candle in the wind. Evelyn stood before me, her eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't decipher: fear, sadness, desperation. "Help me," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo that resonated deep within my soul. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. The world around me faded into a blur as I stood frozen, caught between the living and the dead. In that moment, I realized that I had become a part of her story, drawn into a mystery that demanded to be solved. Whatever darkness lingered in my apartment was not just a ghostly presence, it was a cry for help, and I was the only one who could answer it. The next morning dawned gray and dreary, the sunlight barely penetrating the haze that clung to my windows. I stumbled into the living room, still shaken from the night's events. The overturned furniture lay like remnants of a storm, a stark reminder of the chaos I had faced. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay grounded. Perhaps I had simply imagined it all, a product of sleep deprivation and anxiety. I tried to convince myself that my mind was playing tricks, but the fear clung to me like a shadow. Each creak of the floorboards made me jump, and every whisper of wind outside felt like a prelude to something sinister. As I began to right the furniture, my thoughts turned to the shape I had seen, the familiar outline that seemed to haunt my memory. It felt unsettling, as if I had known it once, long ago. But the more I thought, the more elusive it became, slipping further into the depths of my mind. I decided to distract myself. Maybe a walk outside would clear my head. I pulled on a jacket and stepped out into the cool morning air, the streets of my neighborhood still sleepy. But even the bustling sounds of cars and pedestrians did little to ease my tension. Throughout the day, I struggled to focus, my thoughts constantly returning to the night. The footsteps, the shadow, they lingered like an unanswered question, gnawing at my sanity. I visited the cafe down the street, hoping a strong cup of coffee would help. As I sat in the corner, I overheard snippets of conversations around me, but they felt distant and muted. My mind was a whirlwind of anxiety, trying to piece together what was happening in my life. Then, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor jolted me back to reality. My eyes darted around the cafe, landing on a woman seated nearby, her gaze fixed on me. There was something about her expression, concern, perhaps, or recognition. I quickly averted my eyes, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. Returning home later that evening, the shadows in my apartment felt more pronounced than ever. I flipped on the lights, hoping to dispel the creeping dread that settled in my chest. But even the bright glow could not chase away the unease. As night fell, I made sure to lock the door securely. I settled into the couch again, determination surging within me. Tonight, I would not let fear win. I grabbed a notebook and began to write down everything I could remember about the previous night. Every detail, every sound, every fleeting glimpse of the shadow. As I wrote, I felt a sense of control returning to me. I was reclaiming my narrative, standing firm against the encroaching darkness. Then, just as I started to feel a sense of normalcy, the first footsteps echoed through the apartment. They were soft at first, just a whisper against the floor. My heart raced as I forced myself to listen. This time, there was no denying it. The sound was real, and it was coming from the hallway. I set the notebook down and stood up, every instinct screaming at me to run. But I was determined to face whatever haunted my home. Slowly, I approached the hallway, each step heavy with trepidation. As I neared the end of the corridor, the footsteps stopped. A tense silence enveloped the air, and I strained to hear anything beyond my own heartbeat. My mind was a tempest, battling against the fear that threatened to engulf me. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. No response. Just the echo of my own words fading into the stillness. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement. I turned my head sharply, but the hallway was empty, shadows pooling in the corners, mocking my fear. I took a deep breath, stepping forward to investigate, when suddenly I heard it, a whisper, barely audible yet chilling. "Help me." The words sent a jolt through me, freezing me in place. My breath caught in my throat as I searched the darkness for the source. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Silence hung heavy in the air. I felt the chill creep up my spine, an icy grip of dread that threatened to pull me under. I took another step forward, daring to confront the shadows. "Please, show yourself." Then, without warning, the lights flickered, plunging the hallway into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for the light switch, my hands trembling. The whispering returned, clearer now, echoing through the blackness. "Help me, please." I stumbled back, my heart racing. The words were a plea, but they also felt like a threat, an invitation into something I could not comprehend. I forced myself to breathe, to focus. This was not just a voice in the dark, it was a call for help. "Where are you?" I called, my voice breaking slightly. "What do you need?" In response, the darkness shifted, and I could see it again, the shadow that had haunted my nights. It stood at the end of the hallway, its form barely visible but undeniably present. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I felt an overwhelming need to understand. "Please, just tell me what you want," I pleaded, feeling more vulnerable than ever. The shadow seemed to waver, almost like it was struggling against an unseen force. "Remember," it whispered, the voice both haunting and familiar. A flash of recognition surged through me, a memory teasing the edges of my consciousness. I took a step forward, desperate to grasp it. I don't understand. What do you want me to remember?" But as soon as the question left my lips, the shadow recoiled, dissolving into the darkness, leaving behind a lingering sense of loss and urgency. I stood there, trembling, feeling as if a vital piece of the puzzle had just slipped through my fingers. I was alone once more, but now I understood. I was not just dealing with a haunting. I was being drawn into a mystery that transcended the boundaries of life and death. And somewhere within that darkness lay the answers I desperately sought. As I retreated back to the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that the entity wanted something from me, a truth buried in my past that I had yet to uncover. The footsteps and whispers were no longer just a source of fear. They were the key to a door I needed to open. And I was determined to find out what lay behind it. The following days became a blur of tension and dread. Each night, I found myself staring into the darkness, waiting for the footsteps to return, desperate to glean any clue that would help me understand the shadow. During the day, I tried to act normal, going to work and engaging in mundane conversations, but inside, I was unraveling. I began to research, scouring the internet for stories of hauntings, shadow people, and unexplainable phenomena. I even visited the local library, buried in books about the supernatural. The more I read, the more I found connections between the stories and my experiences, but nothing felt personal enough to explain what was happening to me. One evening, I decided to confront the darkness head-on. I set up a makeshift investigation in my living room. I lit a few candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows across the walls, and placed my notebook in front of me. I intended to document everything that happened. As night descended, I felt a mixture of fear and determination wash over me. The familiar sounds began to fill the apartment, soft footfalls, distant whispers. The tension was palpable, thickening the air around me. "Show yourself," I demanded, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The room fell silent, the only sound being the gentle crackle of the candle flames. I felt foolish, talking to an unseen presence, but I had to try. I picked up my pen, ready to write, when I heard it again, a soft whisper, barely discernible, yet it chilled me to the core. "Remember." "Remember what?" I shouted, frustration mingling with fear. "What do you want from me?" The shadows in the corners seemed to shift, and for a moment I thought I saw the outline of the figure again. It hovered just beyond the flickering light, its form indistinct yet undeniably present. "Help me, find me," it whispered, the urgency in its tone palpable. I felt a pang of empathy mixed with fear. I wanted to help, but the unknown terrified me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Where do I find you?" The shadow moved closer, the darkness swirling around it like a living thing. I could almost see a face now, a silhouette that seemed familiar yet alien. It was as if I was staring at a reflection of someone I had lost long ago. "Your memories, buried, forgotten." A wave of confusion washed over me. Memories? I racked my brain, struggling to piece together any fragments of my past that could explain this haunting presence. "Tell me," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. "What memories? Who are you?" But instead of an answer, the figure flickered like a candle's flame, and with a final whisper, it dissipated into the shadows. The room fell silent, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. I felt an overwhelming sense of loss, as if the entity had taken something vital with it. I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. What did I need to remember? In the following days, I immersed myself in nostalgia. I combed through old photo albums, revisiting moments I had long forgotten. Faces I once knew gazed back at me, and as I flipped through the pages, I began to feel an echo of recognition, a faint connection to the shadow that haunted me. One evening, I stumbled across a photo of a childhood friend, Lily. We had spent countless summers together, but as life often does, we lost touch. Her face struck me as strangely similar to the shadow I had seen. The resemblance was uncanny. A chill ran down my spine. "Could it be you?" I whispered to the photograph, my heart pounding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself drawn to the spot where I used to play as a child, just a few blocks away. The old park felt both familiar and foreign, its swings creaking in the wind, the laughter of children echoing faintly in my mind. I sat on a bench, the cool metal biting into my skin, and closed my eyes. Memories washed over me, Lily's laughter, our secret hideouts, the promises we made to always be there for each other. But something else lingered just beneath the surface, something dark and painful. I remembered a day that had changed everything, a day that had fractured our friendship. It was a rainy afternoon when we had fought over something trivial. The argument had escalated, words were exchanged, and Lily had run off, disappearing into the storm. I had searched for her, calling her name until my voice was hoarse, but she was gone. The next day, I found out she had moved away, and I never had the chance to apologize. A knot formed in my throat as the memories flooded back. "Lily, I'm so sorry," I murmured, tears pricking at my eyes. As if in response, a breeze stirred the leaves around me, and I felt a presence beside me, warm and familiar. "Help me remember," a whisper echoed in the wind, intertwining with the rustling leaves. I opened my eyes, heart racing. The shadows deepened as twilight descended, and for the first time, I felt a strange sense of hope. I had to confront the darkness, not just for myself, but for Lily. I stood up, determination solidifying within me. "I will remember," I vowed, "and I will find you." That night, I returned home, the weight of the past heavy on my shoulders. I placed Lily's photograph on the table and sat down with my notebook. I began to write, pouring out every memory, every emotion, and every ounce of regret I had carried for so long. As I wrote, the shadows began to shift again, the air around me crackling with energy. The familiar footsteps returned, echoing through the apartment, but this time I felt a sense of purpose. "Show yourself," I called out, my voice steady. "I remember. I want to help." The room grew cold, and the figure materialized once more, more defined than before. "You've remembered," it whispered, a glimmer of recognition in its voice. "Now help me finish what we started." I took a deep breath, ready to face the truth, and with it, the chance for redemption. Together, we would unravel the threads of the past, and perhaps in doing so, I would finally understand the haunting echo that had brought me to this moment. The air in my apartment felt electric, charged with a mix of anticipation and fear. The shadow stood before me, more distinct than ever, its form shifting in the flickering candlelight. I could see the outline of a face, one that tugged at the edges of my memory, urging me to dig deeper. "I remember you, Lily," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "I'm so sorry for what happened that day. I didn't mean for things to end like that." The shadows seemed to shift, a ripple of emotion passing through it. "You left me alone," it whispered, sadness lacing its voice. "But I never left you." As the words hung in the air, I felt a pang of sorrow. It was true, I had moved on, buried my memories of our friendship, but Lily had remained. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my heart racing. "How can I help you?" "Find the place where it happened," she urged, her voice trembling like the flickering flames. "The place of our last fight. You must face it to let me go." I nodded, determination surging through me. I could feel the weight of unresolved emotions pressing down, the burden of our past intertwining with the present. "I'll go back to the park," I said, my voice firm. "I'll find that spot." As I gathered myself to leave, the shadows flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a smile in the darkness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The night air was crisp as I stepped outside, the familiar streets guiding me back to the park. Each step felt like a pilgrimage, a journey to confront the ghosts of my past. The swings creaked in the wind, the moon casting long shadows that danced along the ground. When I reached the place where we used to play, memories flooded back, our laughter, our secrets, and that fateful day when everything had changed. The rain had poured down, and in my anger, I had said things I didn't mean. I could still hear the echoes of our voices, filled with hurt and frustration. I closed my eyes, focusing on the emotions that had shaped that moment. "Lily, I'm here," I called out, my voice cutting through the silence. I want to make it right. I want you to be at peace." As if in response, the air grew still, and the shadows gathered around me, forming a swirling mass of darkness. I felt a presence envelop me, the familiar warmth wrapping around me like a hug. "Thank you," her voice resonated, echoing through the night. In that moment, I was transported back to that rainy afternoon. I could see myself as a child, standing in the park, soaked to the bone, anger bubbling inside me. I could hear Lily's voice, pleading with me to stop, to listen. The memory played out like a film, each detail sharp and vivid. "Please, Lily," I was scared. "I didn't want to lose you," I whispered to the past, my heart aching with regret. I should have listened. The shadows around me shifted, and I could see her form take shape, the outline of her face glowing softly in the dim light. "You were never meant to lose me," she said, her voice tender yet firm. "But you must forgive yourself to move forward." Tears streamed down my cheeks as the weight of my guilt crashed over me. I had carried this burden for years, the haunting echoes of my actions leaving me paralyzed. "I forgive myself," I said, my voice cracking. "I wish I could go back and change it all." As I spoke those words, I felt a shift in the air. The darkness began to dissipate, and I sensed a release, a lifting of the heaviness that had settled around us. The shadows retreated, revealing the park bathed in moonlight, the night sky clearing. "Now you must let me go," Lily urged, her voice filled with warmth. "I will always be a part of you, but I can't linger in this world. It's time for both of us to move on." I nodded, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. "I will let you go, Lily. Thank you for holding on for so long." As I spoke those words, I felt the shadows envelop me one last time, a gentle embrace that wrapped around my heart. I closed my eyes and let the warmth fill me, the pain of loss transforming into gratitude for the time we had shared. "Goodbye, my friend," I whispered, my voice steady. "I will remember you always." With that, the shadows lifted, dissipating into the night like wisps of smoke. I stood alone in the park, the moon shining brightly above, illuminating the memories I had long buried. The burden of guilt had lifted, replaced with a sense of closure. As I walked back home, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been removed from my shoulders. I glanced at the photograph of Lily that I had left on the table, a smile breaking through my tears. "Thank you for everything," I said softly, knowing she would always be a part of me. When I stepped inside my apartment, the air felt different, calmer, clearer. The darkness that had once haunted me had transformed into a soothing presence, a reminder of the journey I had taken. I picked up my notebook, flipping through the pages filled with memories, and for the first time, I felt a sense of hope. The night sounds had changed. Instead of footsteps echoing in fear, I now heard whispers of love and remembrance. I knew I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. The haunting was over, and in its place, I found solace in the memories that would forever shape me. But just as I began to settle in, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned quickly, and there it was, the familiar shadow, but this time it was not frightening. It stood at the edge of the light, a gentle reminder of the connection I had forged. "Thank you," it whispered, and for the first time, I felt warmth radiating from it. I smiled, understanding that the past would always be a part of me, but I had the power to shape my future. The echoes of the night had transformed into a melody of hope, guiding me forward into the light. The morning light filtered through my window, casting soft rays across the room. I awoke feeling different, lighter, as if a heavy fog had finally lifted from my mind. The shadows that had once loomed over me were now mere echoes, whispering stories of the past but no longer holding me captive. As I brewed my morning coffee, I found myself smiling. The haunting presence of Lily no longer filled me with dread. Instead, I felt a sense of peace. I remembered her laughter, her kindness, and the memories we had created. They were now a source of strength rather than sorrow. Sitting at my kitchen table, I glanced at the photograph of us from childhood. I reached for it, tracing the outline of her face with my finger. "Thank you for reminding me of the importance of our memories," I whispered, a warmth enveloping me as if she were standing beside me. With renewed purpose, I decided to share our story. I picked up my notebook, filled with my thoughts and revelations, and began to write a letter to Lily, a tribute to our friendship and the lessons learned through our shared past. I wanted to honor her memory and the bond we had forged, even if time and distance had tried to sever it. "Dear Lily," I wrote, pouring my heart onto the page. "You were my dearest friend, and I let my anger cloud our bond. I'm sorry for the hurt I caused. But I promise to remember you, not just in grief, but in gratitude for all the joy you brought to my life." As I wrote, I felt her presence with me, guiding my words, urging me to reflect on the moments that had shaped me. I recalled the adventures we had shared, the secrets whispered under the stars, and the promise we made to always be there for one another. After finishing the letter, I placed it next to the photograph and decided that I would find a way to honor her. Maybe a small gathering with friends, sharing stories and laughter in her memory. I wanted to keep her spirit alive, a reminder that even in loss, love endures. The day unfolded with a sense of renewal. I spent hours tidying my apartment, letting in the sunlight and fresh air. I cleared out old clutter, making space for new memories, new beginnings. With each item I discarded, I felt a weight lift, a step toward healing. That evening, I reached out to a few close friends, inviting them over for a small gathering. I wanted to celebrate life, to share laughter, and to honor Lily's memory. They accepted with enthusiasm, and I felt a wave of warmth wash over me, knowing I would not be alone in this journey. As the sun set, I prepared for the gathering, filling the room with candles and soft music. When my friends arrived, the atmosphere felt electric, filled with laughter and warmth. We shared stories, reminiscing about our own childhoods, our dreams, and the little things that made life beautiful. In the midst of our conversation, I felt a familiar presence, a gentle warmth surrounding me. I looked around, half expecting to see Lily among us, but it was simply the comfort of friendship and love that enveloped the room. As the night wore on, I decided to share my story, opening up about my experiences with the shadow and my journey to reconnect with Lily. My friends listened intently, their eyes wide with empathy and understanding. I felt lighter as I spoke, the weight of my past transforming into a shared experience, a reminder that we all carry our own shadows. When the evening drew to a close, I felt a sense of closure settling within me. I gathered my friends in a circle, holding hands as we shared a moment of gratitude. To friendships, both past and present, I said, my voice steady. To the memories that shape us and the love that endures, no matter the distance. As we lifted our glasses in a toast, I felt the warmth of Lily's presence, a soft whisper of gratitude washing over me. The shadows that had once haunted me were now filled with light, and I realized that the love we shared could never truly fade. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey I had taken. The fear, the darkness, and the shadows had all been necessary to lead me to this moment, a moment of understanding, acceptance, and growth. I had faced my past, honored the memory of a dear friend, and emerged stronger, more resilient. The following days unfolded with a renewed sense of purpose. I continued to write, documenting my journey and the lessons I had learned. Each page filled with memories, reflections, and hopes for the future. The words flowed freely, a cathartic release of everything I had held inside. As time passed, I found myself revisiting the park where our friendship had blossomed. Each visit became a ritual, a way to honor Lily, to remember the laughter we had shared, and to celebrate the love that transcended loss. I brought flowers, leaving them at the spot where we had played, a small token of remembrance. With each passing day, the shadows that had once loomed over me faded further into the background. They transformed into gentle reminders of the love I had experienced, the lessons I had learned, and the friendships I continued to nurture. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace envelop me. The colors painted across the sky reminded me of the beauty in both light and darkness, the balance of life. I understood now that the night sounds would never disappear. They were simply part of the tapestry of existence. The footsteps I once feared became a part of my story, a reminder of the love I have for Lily and the importance of cherishing every moment. I had learned to embrace the echoes of the past, allowing them to guide me rather than haunt me. As I closed my eyes, a gentle breeze whispered through the air, carrying with it a sense of contentment. I smiled, knowing that I was never truly alone. The bonds of love and friendship would forever guide me, illuminating the path ahead, even in the darkest of nights. And as the stars began to twinkle above, I knew that I had finally found my way home. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.